There's a dead pixel in the night sky display of the Tulpar's common room. Most of the crew have learned to ignore it, this tiny flaw in their artificial window to the stars. But Anya can't stop staring at it. She knows it's not real. None of it is. Not the stars, not the cheerful mascot standing sentinel in the corner, not even the smiles they wear as they celebrate another birthday with recycled cake mix. 147 days into their 382-day journey, reality has begun to crack like the frost spreading across their viewpoints. In the sterile corridors, shadows play across empty halls while emergency lights pulse steadily. The Tulpar drifts through the void, its cargo holds filled with endless crates of mouthwash stacked in neat rows. Mundane cargo that will take on darker significance as events unfold. But something has gone terribly wrong aboard this vessel. The ship's captain lies wrapped in bandages, his skin seared away, while expanding foam fills the corridors like a living thing, blocking paths and creating an ever-shifting maze of dead ends and false hopes. Mouthwashing is a story that begins with a mystery. Why would a long-haul freighter bound for the outer reaches of known space carry nothing but endless crates of mouthwash? But this puzzle soon gives way to even darker questions. What catastrophe left Captain Curly unable to move, his flesh hidden beneath layers of gauze? What truths hide behind Jimmy the co-pilot's steady glare? And why does the foam creep through the ship's corridors, as if the vessel itself is trying to digest its crew? 5 people trapped in the void, a captain who can no longer lead, a co-pilot haunted by his past and his present actions, a nurse who seems to harbour deep trauma, a mechanic carrying the weight of too many secrets, and an intern whose optimism will be tested against the darkness of space. Through isolation and desperation, we witness how their bonds strengthen and shatter under pressure, how identity is shaped by routine and suddenly faces chaos, and how the desperate need to take care of it can lead to devastating consequences. The truth unfolds through 2 distinct lenses. Captain Curly, whose early interactions with the crew reveal the subtle fractures in their relationships, and Jimmy, the co-pilot, whose unreliable narration guides us through the aftermath of disaster. Through their interweaving perspectives, we understand that the collision that stranded them in space may have been the least of their disasters. But to understand how it all unravels, how birthday celebrations turn to bloodshed, how simple protocols become instruments of terror, how the mundane act of mixing a drink becomes an exercise in calculated malice, we must first return to the beginning, before the foam filled the halls, before the bandages covered burnt flesh, before they discovered that in the cold emptiness of space, the most dangerous monsters weren't lurking in shadows, but the ones sitting across the table, sharing that last slice of recycled cake. However, before we delve deeper into this darkness, a brief note. If you're enjoying these deep dives into gaming's darker corners, consider joining our journey to 10,000 subscribers before year's end. It's a bit of an ambitious goal, I admit, but your support through likes, subscriptions, and especially our Patreon helps us continue exploring these fascinating games in depth. Obviously, you don't have to join the Patreon or join the channel, but it would help immensely. You can join our growing community for early access to videos like this and input on future topics. Links are in the description below. Some information about mouthwashing before we begin though. Released in 2024 by Wrong Organ and published by Critical Reflex, Mouthwashing immediately drew attention for its unique approach to narrative horror. On a mechanical level, it's deceptively simple. A third-person exploration game with puzzle elements, what some might call a walking simulator. But the simplicity masks something far more complex. A split narrative that jumps between time periods, perspective, and realities. The game garnered praise for its bold visual style and intricate storytelling, particularly in its handling of these dual perspectives, Captain Curly before the crash and Jimmy in its aftermath. These transitions between viewpoints aren't just narrative devices, they're ruptures in reality, often marked by glitches and crashes that blur the line between technical malfunction and psychological breakdown. But to truly understand the horror that unfolds aboard the Tulpar, we must piece together its fractured timeline. Through birthday celebrations and broken promises, misplaced trust and calculated betrayals, and the moments when mask slip and true natures are revealed. Each scene holds a piece of the puzzle, each memory contains a clue, and somewhere in the spaces between perspective lies the truth of what really happened during those 147 days in the void. I hope this hurts. These 4 words hang in the void of space, outlasting the clinical details that preceded them. Details about a long-haul freighter called the Tulpar, its crew of 5 and its 382-day journey. Details about how they're 147 days in. Details that should matter, but somehow don't. Not compared to that single, haunting sentence that refuses to fade. I hope this hurts. The silence breaks. We're in the cockpit now. 0 days before the crash overlaid on our vision like a prophecy. Green monitors cast their sickly glow across control panels, each displaying a window into the ship's vital signs. They're all saying the same thing, something ahead of us, 21 astronomical units out, a mass we must avoid. The correction required is minimal, 1.4 degrees left. A routine adjustment for any pilot, any normal pilot, any pilot who wasn't about to do exactly what we're about to do. Our hands find the controls but don't respond as they should. The ship only turns right, inexorably drawn towards what we're supposed to avoid. The navigation panel erupts in red warnings, the ship's systems desperately trying to prevent what we've already decided. Extreme warning. Direct collision course. The autopilot engages in a last-ditch effort at salvation. Even here, corporate bureaucracy intrudes. 4,000 credits deducted from crew pay packet for failure of navigational staff. As if money will matter after what comes next. Standing in the pilot seats feels like an act of rebellion. Behind us, a terminal glows with fatalistic certainty. There's nothing else to be done. The utility cupboard yields 2 artifacts that will seal 5 fates. Anya's employee card, its photos staring accusingly, and an emergency key that was never meant for this purpose. Disabling the autopilot feels less like sabotage and more like destiny. Crash imminent paints the cockpit in crimson light. The alarms that follow us into the corridor should be deafening, but they're somehow distant, as if we've already disconnected from reality. The hallways we enter are a monument to corporate aesthetics. Steel pipes, functional lighting, and endless posters featuring Polly, the company's mascot, with his frozen smile watching our progress. But something wrong with these corridors. They loop and twist, defying spatial logic. With each pass, more posters appear. Polly's face multiplying across surfaces like a visual virus. The lights begin their death dance, flickering, sparking, transforming. Familiar paths into something alien. A door refuses to open, held fast by unseen forces. When we turn away and look back, the darkness has consumed the path behind us. And there, in that manufactured void, stands Polly. Not the cheerful corporate mascot from the posters, but something else, something wrong. Behind him, the ship's pipes writhe like tentacles, forming an impossible barrier. As we approach, a sound cuts through the chaos. The distorted cries of a baby, echoing from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Each new encounter with this Polly twists reality further. The mascot deforms, sprouting limbs that shouldn't exist, and its cartoon features warping into mockeries of themselves. The baby's cries grow more insistent, layered now with laboured breathing and a deep mechanical drone that seems to emanate from the ship's dying heart. Steam hisses from ruptured pipes, smoke rises through floor grates, and emergency lights cast everything in apocalyptic red. At the final door, we face Polly's ultimate incarnation, a thing that should not be. The screaming peaks, reality shudders, and everything whites out in a system crash that feels less like a technical malfunction and more like mercy. When our vision clears, 2 months has passed. We're at a table with Swansea, Daisuke, and Anya, survivors of what we've just done. But this isn't the end of the horror. It's barely even the beginning. Two months after the crash, desperation becomes our constant companion. We sit around the table, 4 survivors, and a question that could damn us all. Through Jimmy's eyes, we see them now, each face illuminated by the emergency lighting that's become our perpetual twilight. There's Swansea, the ship's mechanic, his face carved with cynicism earned through years of corporate service. He wears his experience like armor, each bitter word a shield against hope that might prove false. To his right sits Daisuke, his intern, young, eager, dangerously optimistic, the kind of optimism that hasn't yet learned what space can do to people. Our medical officer Anya carries herself like someone used to being dismissed. Her expertise in healing stands in cruel irony against our current situations. Her eyes keep darting to the corridor that leads to the medical bay, where Captain Curley lies wrapped in bandages, unable to move or speak, a living reminder of what brought us here. And then there's Jimmy, us, the co-pilot turned acting captain. Through his eyes, we see what the others can't, the weight of command settling like a noose around his neck. Anyone else would do the same thing, Jimmy says, the words hanging in the recycled air like a plea for absolution. Swansea's response cuts through pretense. We ain't touching the damn cargo. The holder's locked down for a reason. The only thing worse than dying slowly is not getting paid.
But it could still be useful, I think.
Anya ventures, her voice carrying a trace of hope that Swansea seems determined to crush. Could be what? Hopes, dreams, and marzipan? Ha!
You don't have to.
Anya's words trail off, heavy with unspoken history. Jimmy interjects, authority mixing with desperation. If it helps us survive, it's worth it. Man, Pony Express bosses aren't chill at all, huh? Daisuke chimes in, youth making him brave. Come on, a quick look won't hurt. How exactly is this group therapy committee planning on getting in there? Swansea's words drip with sarcasm. Daisuke brightens, proud of his solution. Oh, right here, boss, you're looking at the meanest swing of the regional baseball team. Straight up nearly corked a kid once. I can take the utility axe and... You were goddamn born fully corked. Swansea's shout echoes off metal walls. That's enough, Swansea. Jimmy's voice carries the weight of his new authority. There has to be an in case of emergency way in.
If I remember correctly from the safety protocols...
Anya speaks carefully, each word measured.
The doors should have an alternate access code. But it can only be uncovered using a code scanner device.
And only the captain has access to the scanner, Jimmy finishes, a plan forming. Swansea's laugh is as bitter as battery acid. Of course, go and ask him all about it then. Maybe he'll sing you the blues too. We don't need him if we find the scanner, get the code, and open the hole. For better or worse, I'm captain now. I'll figure it out. Right on, Daisuke's enthusiasm seems to bounce off the metal walls, making the emergency lights feel somehow dimmer. As the others drift away to their assigned posts, their designated corners of this metal cage, we're left with our objective. Find the code scanner. But in Tulpar's corridors, every search carries consequences, and some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The lounge mocks us with its attempts at comfort. Polly, the corporate mascot, watches from every single angle. Posters, statues, an omnipresent reminder of the company that stationed us here. Against one wall, a massive monitor displays an endless sunset, its crimson light washing over everything in synthetic warmth. It's a facsimile of normalcy, a corporate band-aid over the void outside. Daisuke sits before this artificial horizon, perhaps finding comfort in its lie. On our way to him, we pass the vending machines, monuments to our survival. We'd be dead without this thing, Jimmy muses at the food dispenser. Never thought I'd be thankful for Pony Express grub. The coffee machine earns a different recognition. This machine was empty even before the crash. Swansea saw to that. A half-finished board game sits on the table, frozen mid-play, like everything else in this limbo. Looks like it'll be soup again for dinner, Daisuke says, his attempt at levity evident. You want a rock, paper, scissors for the chicken noodle? Jimmy cuts through the playfulness. How much food we have left? I'd say like 4 months-ish. It is less than the remaining air supply, but we can make it last. In theory. We'll be starting to poke new holes in our belts pretty soon to pull that off. Daisuke's optimism remains unshaken. Man, my mom will straight up stuff me when I get back. I'll look like Swansea. We'll have a rad story to tell though. They might even write articles about us. We could be on TV. It'll impress the ladies too. Hell yeah. The real problem is that we're running out of toilet paper. Fatal stuff, man. We should leave that part out for the press. After this exchange, we carry on to the corridor to utility, as it's still choked with emergency foam. The ship's last-ditch effort to seal itself against the vacuum of space has hardened into a maze-like barrier that defines our new boundaries. Swansea stands guards at utility's entrance, his posture a mixture of vigilance and resignation. I'm working, he announces unprompted. Blue-collar fools can't afford to stop working even when the machine does. Go figure. And before you start, I'm taking a break. Don't worry, I'm not exceeding my break time allowance, ha. Working on what? How does it look in there? It's a solid wall of foam, his expression darkens. The stuff's designed to expand and harden on contact with a vacuum, save the ship from depressurization. I'm trying to see if I can break it down enough to get something useful out. Any of my tools. But if I breach that foam and break the air seal, it's lights out for all of us. I ain't letting anyone else mess around in there. The medical bay presents a different kind of horror. Another sunset screen casts its artificial glow, but it only highlights the grotesque here. Captain Curly lies motionless, his entire body wrapped in bandages that can't quite contain the seeping evidence of his injuries. The crash turned his flesh to char and left him a living monument to what happens when metal meets fire in the void of space. He survived, if you can call this survival, unable to move, speak, or do anything but endure. Anya stands beside him, her posture betraying her exhaustion.
He doesn't want to keep still anymore.
What about the painkillers?
It just hurts him so much. I can't stand the noise.
Jimmy's response drips with cruel dismissal. You did make it through nursing school, right? Pony Express sure does know how to cut corners if nothing else. The irony of his contempt is stark. She managed to keep a catastrophically burned man alive with limited supplies, a feat that would challenge the most experienced trauma teams. She continues, ignoring the jab.
I was thinking, we never went back into the cockpit after we dragged him out.
It's almost entirely foamed up. It's kind of a miracle Curly didn't end up fossilized, but it could still be unstable.
I think, well, it's the only place the code scanner could still be.
Otherwise, we're shit out of luck. I'll take a look.
I know you'll figure it out, Jimmy. You're so capable. Oh, also, well, I was hoping you could help me with Captain.
Curly. Jimmy's correction carries weight.
Right, sorry, with Curly's medication.
People have to be worth their titles, don't you think, Nurse Anya?
Yeah, forget I asked.
I'll take care of it. The oxycodone bottle feels heavy in our hands. Approaching Curly, we grasp his jaw. Hold still, yeah? I don't like this any more than you do. You know what they say, pain is how we know we're still living. Anya's voice trembles.
I can't bear to listen. Excuse me, sorry.
The screen goes black, but the sounds remain. The pop of the pill bottle, the wet sounds of forced swallowing, and Curly's laboured breathing. When vision returns, his rapt face stares up at us, eyes twitching beneath the gauze in what might be an accusation, might be agony. A damaged vent in the floor catches our attention as we leave. This vent has been busted forever, at least according to Swansea. Probably beyond wrecked now. The words feel prophetic, though we don't know it yet. Back in the lounge, we find Anya hunched over, the weight of what she couldn't watch visible in every line of her body. The artificial sunset continues its endless loop, indifferent to the horror beneath its glow. We find Anya where we left her, haunted by what she couldn't watch. Before we can finish saying, we don't have a whole lot of painkillers left, but you still want to keep... She cuts through with the question that's eating her.
Why do you think he did it?
Jimmy's dismissal is immediate, practiced. Does it matter? What answer would make you feel any better?
I have to believe that our worst moments don't make us monsters, Jim.
Her voice carries the weight of someone trying to convince themselves.
I have to, even in his case.
He tried to take us all down with him, Anya. Jimmy's words are sharp and clinical. The way I see it, there's two reasons to keep him alive. I guess the important bit is that we all agreed to it, for one reason or another.
I'm still feeling nauseous. I need a minute.
Low, leaving the weight of unspoken things behind her. The cockpit is now barely recognizable. Emergency foam has transformed it into an alien landscape, bulbous formations glowing in apocalyptic red under emergency lighting. Where we once steered into disaster, now that there are only these twisted monuments to our survival. But there, amid the chaos, a blue light pulses, the code scanner, waiting to be found like a beacon in hell. In the cargo hold, anticipation builds. Daisuke's optimism feels out of place in the heavy air. What do you guys think we've been shipping? If it's spare parts, maybe Swansea and I can repair the ship and get out of here. Right, Swansea? Quit yapping, Swansea's response feels like a door closing. The code scanner's blue light reveals numbers hidden on the wall. 1517. As we input them, the cargo hold doors groan open with the weight of revelation. Row upon row of identical boxes stretch into the darkness, their uniform presence somehow more menacing than any horror we've faced. They stand like silent sentinels, holding secrets we're not yet ready to understand. The scene fractures, reality bending as it did in the crash. When it reforms, we return to the past, to 7 days before the crash. The medical room is bright and clean, untouched by the foam and desperation that will come to define it. Captain Curly sits whole, unburned, unknown, across from Nurse Anya. It's time for a psychological evaluation that, in hindsight, might have revealed everything, if only we'd known what to look for. The medical bay gleams under standard lighting. It is sterile and proper, and so different from what it will become. A first aid box sits on the table, demanding our attention as Anya's voice cuts through our distraction.
Are you listening?
We turn to her, nurse Anya as she was before. Through Curly's eyes, we see her clearly, though sleep deprivation makes the edges blur. Yeah, damn, I'm so sorry, couldn't sleep again. There is a pause in the question that matters. But I passed the psych eval?
Well, you gave the same answers as last time.
There's a concern in her voice and professional worry.
I do wish you'd open up a little bit more, Captain. These evaluations aren't just about you.
As long as I'm fit to fly in your eyes, Anya.
Oh, stop it. Guess that means I only have one more eval left to do.
Jimmy? The name hangs in the air between them.
He acts as if I do these things for fun.
Frustration colours her words.
And then I have to make a report with things like, I have found myself sexually excited at the sight of cartoon horses.
Curly's laugh feels genuine from a time before everything broke. Well, I could take it off your hands.
Really?
Hope brightens her voice. I've known him for a long time. He won't try and bullshit with me.
I suppose you are the captain.
The words will echo differently in days to come. I am the captain. It is a simple statement of fact, not yet laden with irony.
Thank you, what a relief.
Anya brightens, reaching for something.
Oh, before I forget, Swansea asked me to give you this.
The note she hands over carries its message in angry capitals. They can't expect me to perform miracles.
Not sure what it means, but sounds like fun. Good luck, Captain.
The scene settles into place, the tulpa before disaster, before foam-filled corridors and burned flesh, before secrets turn to violence. We have a simple task ahead, talk to Jimmy and Swansea, but now in this clean and orderly medical bay, we're walking into history that we can't change, towards a crash we don't yet know is coming. Well, I can see the issue, we offer, drawing Swansea's immediate ire. The kid was brought on just to make me suffer. Intern my ass. Daisuke's voice emerges from his foam prison. I was just trying to fix the vent. How did that trigger the emergency foam? Because you're talented in all the wrong ways. Swansea's mockery carries an edge. I would deal with this, but only you can unlock the X case. Every goddamn thing has to go through you. We try to defuse the situation. I'll handle it. Hang in there, Daisuke. The code scanner reveals the combination for the X case. Another tool that will play part in futures we can't yet see. We free Daisuke from his foam prison. His yelp of, ouch, oof, strong stuff, huh? Almost childlike in its innocence. Swansea's patience has worn tissue thin. Get it through your damn skull. That vent is off limits, fully fucking collapsed inside. Are you looking to get impaled, electrocuted, and cooked? Yeah, but like, Daisuke's response carries a devastating logic. You can't fit in there to fix it, right? The silence that follows speaks volumes. Daisuke, undeterred, continues, so I can handle it. Captain, give me the axe. Swansea's request carries menace. Swansea, this could have damaged the pods. You can't let something like this happen again. Yeah, I got it. Loud and clear. We leave him the axe. Keep the axe until you've cleaned this all up, yeah? A decision that will echo through time. What are you standing around for? Swansea barks at Daisuke. Clean this mess up. It's okay to be big, boss. My grams were super huge, and he lived until like 60. Daisuke's attempt at peacemaking only emphasizes his youth. Jimmy waits in the doorway, a shadow against the corridor lights. And Pony Express said they don't provide onboard entertainment. Feels like there's always something broken in that room. Tulpa's started to show her age. Past inspection, right? Shouldn't be an issue. Jimmy's reassurance carries an irony he doesn't yet intend. Plus they added Daisuke at the last minute. I didn't account for the fact that there'd be 5 of us now. I really should have made a bigger stink about that. I take it Anya diagnosed you of being sane then. Just off center, but it keeps me on my toes. We can't resist the opening. I said I'd do yours. I want to hear all about those cartoon horses. Is that something you were born with, or a recent development? Alright, shut up. Let's go to the cockpit. As we follow Jimmy towards the cockpit, every step takes us closer to a moment when all these small tensions, these minor irritations, these seemingly innocent conversations will converge into catastrophe. But for now, we're just 2 crew members heading to the bridge, pretending everything is normal. Reality begins to fold in on itself as we follow Jimmy to the cockpit. The corridor stretching beyond possibility, each turn revealing another hallway, another descent. The music fades to silence, leaving us alone with our footsteps as we descend a staircase that shouldn't exist. Each step taking us further from the rational geometry that the tulpa is meant to have. At the bottom, we find ourselves on industrial pipes suspended over an infinite void. There's no choice but to drop. We fall into an ankle-deep sea of blood that extends in every direction, the vast array of stars above serving as silent witness to this impossible space. The familiar becomes horrific. Emergency warnings multiply like cancer across our vision, their red glow reflecting off the crimson pool. Emergency repeats endlessly, a chorus of digital panic. Broken ladders emerge from the blood like ribs from a decaying corpse, rising again and again, while laughter mingles with blaring alarms in a growing crescendo of madness. Then comes a light, something like a sun, but wrong, growing larger, consuming everything, until there's nothing left but a white void and a single door. A door to normalcy, to the cockpit, to Jimmy waiting as if nothing happened. The evaluation begins with casual dismissal. You can't just make something up for this, Jimmy asks. It's not like these evals ever go anywhere when we return. We'll power through it, we insist, falling into the routine. Have you completed your mandated tasks as a co-pilot efficiently and to your fullest capacity? Let's see. Time slips and we're at the end. I'll just put good for that one. That's all of them. Done and done. A pause, then. How are things otherwise? Off the record. I like it. We're in control here. Didn't think you'd ever take to being a freighter pilot as well as you have. What about how you struggled back on Earth? Sure, all I ever hear is how great of a leader you are. Honestly, it's kind of annoying. So what is it? How come it always seems like you're standing on the edge of a bridge with your feet in cement? Our response comes from somewhere deep. Lately, I've just been thinking, should I stay here because I've been successful at it? A good long-haul freighter captain. That's bad? That's what I'm saying. It's not, but it's terrifying, I think. Am I figured out? Is this all I'll ever be? Or do I take the risk and try something new, even if I'm bad at it? I guess I get it. You reached the highest rung on this ladder, so now you're thinking you might be on the wrong ladder altogether. It's still a long way down from the top, no matter how you look at it. Well, I'm still climbing and climbing. Something like that. Hey, you know I believe in you. Here, on Earth, it doesn't matter. You should write that on the psychoval. The moment breaks with mechanical precision. Incoming message flashes across screens as a fax machine whirs to life. The anachronistic device, a relic of corporate bureaucracy preserved in space like a technological fossil, begins its work. Oh no, the big guys themselves, Jimmy says, already moving to leave. Guess that's my cue. I'll see you later. We reach for the emerging paper, but can only make out 3 words before reality fractures again. After all, the screen contorts and crashes, and we're left wondering which was more real. The sea of blood or the conversation that... As the screen crashes and contorts, we come to a new area. Take responsibility pulses in the darkness, each letter distorting and writhing like something alive, something angry. The words hang in blood red against our vision as we find ourselves seemingly at the bottom of the cargo hold, that vast cathedral of cardboard boxes we discovered moments ago, now transformed into something else entirely. Our flashlight beam cuts through the darkness like a sculptor's chisel, revealing glimpses of the endless walls of cargo that tower into the unseen heights above. The floor seems to swallow our footsteps, each sound feeling wrong, as if we're walking on something that isn't solid. Light bleeds upwards from some impossible source below, creating shadows that move when we don't. And then we see a television set, alone in this vast darkness, its presence as unpredictable as a laugh at a funeral. It waits for us like an altar, broadcasting its sermon to empty air. The programming begins innocuously enough, a corporate video about employee benefits. The narrator's voice is too smooth and practiced, extolling the virtues of saving plans, vacation time, and a stable income, all the little comforts that chain us to our desks. The image shifts violently, something cosmic, something vast. A spiral of light and energy seems to stare back at us through the screen, its presence suggesting scales of existence we were never meant to comprehend. It's the kind of thing that makes human concerns feel like ant debates about which crumb to carry. Then, whiplash quick, we're watching an educational cartoon about atoms. Everything is made of atoms, the cheerful narrator explains, as if this fundamental truth could somehow make sense of what we've just witnessed. As if breaking reality down to its smallest parts could explain away the horror. The next segment hits like a hammer. Raw footage seemingly from a slaughterhouse, carcasses hanging in industrial precision. The clinical efficiency of industrialized death is presented without comment or context. Another process, another pipeline, another example of systems at work. A snake oil commercial follows, its message clear beneath the vintage veneer. Control through chemical means, workers made compliant through formula and dosage. The dancing skeleton that follows feels less like entertainment and more like prophecy. Finally, we arrive at the truth dressed in commercial gloss. Dragon Breath's new and improved mouthwash. Designed to kill bacteria and germs without leaving a bad taste. Kills 99% of germs. The camera lingers just long enough for us to read the fine print, crawling along the bottom edge, a corporate disclaimer absolving them of responsibility for any harm that might come. The screen fragments, reality reasserts itself, and we're back in the present, 2 months after the crash, with all the horror that implies. The cargo hold's vastness suddenly feels like a joke at our expense. Row upon row, box upon box, all containing nothing but mouthwash. Jimmy stares at a bottle, reality refusing to align with what he sees. The words stumble out of Jimmy's mouth like they're trying to escape the truth.
Mouthwash?
Anya's question wavers in the air, her voice destabilizing like the text. Swansea's response cuts through the disbelief. Unfucking believable. There's gotta be an ocean of the stuff in here. Daisuke's innocent enthusiasm only highlights the absurdity. This room looks freaking endless. Jimmy's voice rises angrily. This is what they'd have 5 people hauling for over a year? All of this? For mouthwash?
The sugar content probably offsets any potential as a disinfectant.
Anya's clinical assessment is interrupted by Swansea's sudden interest. Disinfectant? What are you? Let me see that. There is a pause as he reads the label. 14% ethanol. Daisuke laughs nervously. I suppose it will smell good at least? That's right, kiddo. You can bet your ass on that. Swansea's voice carries an edge of manic glee.
What are you doing? Stop that.
Anya's protest comes too late as Swansea takes a long drink from the bottle. Woo-wee! Oh, shut up. The words spray out with minty freshness. I'm just an old codger taking care of his dental hygiene. You hear that? That's the sound of 15 years of sobriety popping like a cyst. A glorious, magnificent, red-hot cyst. Good riddance and cheers. To Captain Curly. Hear, hear. Guess anyone could get seriously blasted off of this stuff. Daisuke's observation carries a note of worry. Yeah, and it'll kill you in the process. Jimmy's warning is disregarded.
This can't be real. There's no way.
Anya's disbelief echoes our own. Swansea's descent continues unabated. Now we can go out in style. Daisuke, come here. Anyone ever teach you how to drink like a man? Reality fractures again, pulling us back through time. 6 days before the crash, before the mouthwash becomes salvation and poison, before Curly's skin was burned away. We're about to deliver news from corporate HQ, not yet knowing how all these threads will weave together into catastrophe. We return to the days before the crash, in the shoes of the captain, as we make our way up the stairs from utility to the lounge to deliver the news from corporate. Nothing good. As we approach the lounge door, it opens to unexpected light and warmth. A birthday surprise that feels like a punch to the gut, knowing what we have to tell them.
We only get one communal birthday party per trip, right? So we can have it whenever.
Anya explains, her smile genuine. Jimmy adds context. We did Swansea last tour, remember? The irony is thick. As captain, we're the only ones with authorization to create our birthday cake. I hate to say it though, but your duties have to extend to even your own birthday party, Jimmy notes.
You're the only one with clearance to make the cake.
Anya adds. The cake-making process feels like a ritual now tainted by foreknowledge. The code scanner reveals the ingredients: sweetener, water, and gelatin. Each step of assembly becomes weighted with meaning, mixing water and gelatin for the base, adding sweetener for palatability. This is a perfect metaphor for making bitter news digestible. They gather around the table, these people whose lives we're about to upend. Daisuke young and eager. You gotta make a speech. Can't argue with that, Jimmy adds, not knowing how much he'll argue soon. Speech, speech, speech! Daisuke's enthusiasm is infectious.
Go on.
Even Anya joins in. The words stick in our throat. Uncertainty is visible enough for Jimmy to notice. Hey, what's wrong? The revelation lands like a torpedo on the hull. That's all it said on the management report. We will receive the paycheck for this delivery. I don't know any more than that. Swansea's bitter laugh says he's seen it coming. Pony Express finally kicking the bucket, huh? What a joke. And we're the punchline.
I don't have any savings. They can't do this, right?
Anya's panic is palpable. Pony Express was one of the last manned crew freighter companies, Swansea explains with resignation. The writing's been on the wall for a long time. When did they tell you? Jimmy's question carries accusation. Earlier this week, I was instructed to wait until we were closer to the whole destination, but I can't keep something like this from you all. Jimmy's response drips venom. So I guess you got what you wanted, without the guilt. Jim, if I'd known, I can go back to my, how did you put it, struggle of a life. Anya never got into medical school because she's, well, let's be real. And how many employment years did Swansea have left in him? Daisuke will be fine. Mommy and Daddy have him covered. So there's that at least. But you, headed for bigger and better, huh? I'm just working on my life being in a place I don't have to fucking escape. That's what I was trying to tell you, nothing more. The table shakes with Jimmy's anger. We're the ones you're trying to escape. Leave the dirt behind now that your boots are clean. That's not what I meant. It is what you meant. You just couldn't frame it to yourself in a way that kept you as the hero. Abandon the crew but remain the model captain. Unbelievable, Swansea mutters.
What? What am I supposed to do?
Anya's voice breaks. Let's have some fucking cake, Props to the twilight crews of the Tulpa. Props to our captain and his new prospects. The knife feels heavy in our hands. We begin to cut, a soaring motion that will echo through time, splitting the cake like we're breaking the crew. Reality fractures again before the blade completes its journey, but the memory of that cutting motion lingers. In a different context, we'll see it again, with far deadlier consequences. Pain has a voice aboard the Tulpa. 3 months after the crash, it speaks through Curly's sobs, echoing through corridors that were never meant to carry such sounds. We wake to these cries on our sleeping mat, the ship's artificial night providing no refuge from reality. The lounge has become a museum of decay. Empty food containers chronicle our dwindling supplies, while the eternal sunset display casts everything in a perpetual twilight. Too bright to sleep, too dim to truly see. Anya's empty sleeping space prompts Jimmy's hollow observation. Maybe she's with Curly? Swansea's absence is equally telling. He keeps sleeping outside utility. The painkillers feel lighter with each passing day. We collect another precious bottle, knowing it's not enough, knowing it will never be enough. Curly writhes on his medical bed, a prophet of agony whose bandages can't contain his suffering. The sheets beneath him tell its own story in dark stains and twisted fabric. But procedures must be followed, even here, at the end of hope. We find Anya in the cockpit with Swansea, their conversation cutting off at our approach.
No, I understand completely. If that's how it has to be.
Oh, it's you.
Jimmy! Not able to sleep either?
Anya's forced cheer rings false. It's nighttime. Why are you talking this late? Anya, are you crying?
No, don't worry, I'm okay.
We all need to keep it together. The words taste like ash. Have you given Curly his meds?
No. Must have slipped my mind. I'm sorry,
I'll do it. Jimmy's insistence on handling Curly's medication reveals the twisted heart of his relationship with command. His time as acting captain isn't just duty, it's punishment, revenge, and validation all at once. Where Curly led through cooperation and trust, Jimmy leads through control and force. Each time he administers medication, he's not just helping Curly, he's demonstrating his power over this man who once held that same power over him. Back in medical, Curly's suffering provides the soundtrack to Jimmy's unraveling. Come on, stop with the noise. Damn it, I know what everyone is thinking. The way they look at me. What could I even say? And then, what would she do? Damn it. Here we are now, me in the driver's seat. Thanks for that. Open up. I hope these make you fucking feel better. The darkness swallows the scene, but not the sounds. Those awful gargling noises that mark another forced dosing. When we turn to leave, reality tears once more, and those accusatory words return. Take responsibility. The broken form of Curly sits at the celebration table, a grotesque parody of happier times. Jimmy's captainship is a perversion of leadership, born not from merit, but from catastrophe, maintained not through respect, but through necessity. His twisted sense of responsibility is really a mask for deeper resentments, towards Curly for having the respect he craves, towards the crew for seeing through his performance, towards himself for actions he can't yet face. In forcing medication down Curly's throat, he's not just maintaining order, he's enacting a ritual of dominance over the man whose approval he once sought, and whose position he now holds through the very violence that stripped Curly of his authority. The lounge has become a nightmare reflection of itself. Emergency lights cast everything in blood red. The once comforting sunset display, now a shattered eye of warning. At the table sits Curly, not as he was, but as Jimmy made him, wrapped in bandages, a monument to consequence. We should have some. The words emerged from beneath the gauze, terrible in their normalcy. Why? It's mediocre at best, obviously. Jimmy's response carries all his old contempt, as if speaking to a burned man at a dead party is the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes you only get the subpar stuff. Curly's philosophical tone feels wrong coming from his ruined form. That's what makes the really good stuff, well, good, right? Why bother? The camera pushes in on Curly's devastated face, forcing us to confront what we've done as he delivers his sermon on acceptance. Hey, we all tried to escape. Didn't work for any of us. I've thought many times, is this what peace feels like? And is it good enough? If I'm being real, it certainly isn't the best. So all I can do is try and make my life one I'm not trying to run from all the time. Sometimes I'll be promoted, buy a house, fall in love. But other times I'll just have some awful fucking cake with my friend. Right now, that sounds pretty brilliant, yeah? So, if you'll do the honors? Right, well, let me go find a knife. The exchange is a perversion of their earlier conversations about ambition and escape. Curly, even in this nightmare form, tries to impart one final lesson about acceptance and finding peace in imperfection. But Jimmy's response to seek a weapon reveals how thoroughly he's missed the point. Where Curly speaks of making peace with what is, Jimmy still seeks to destroy what he can't accept. We traverse the ship's decayed corridors, now more morgue than vessel. The sporadic lighting creates a strobing journey through guilt, each flash revealing another consequence of our actions. In the cockpit we find not a knife, but an axe, buried in the captain's chairs like Excalibur in reverse, surrounded by blood. A symbol not of rightful authority, but of violent usurpation. Our objective transforms from the mundane to the monstrous. Feast. The monitors become a jury of eyes, all watching, all knowing. The whispers start, quiet at first, then building into a symphony of curly sobs and mocking laughter, accompanied by a crescendo of cheerful music that feels like an accusation. At the lounge door, silence falls like a guillotine. The monitor's single eye watches as Curly lies spread on the table like a sacrifice. The axe in our hands feels hungry as we approach, ready to carve more than just cake. But reality fractures before we can complete this ritual of violence. We return to Jimmy, 4 months post-crash, standing amongst the evidence of their collective descent. Empty mouthwash boxes and bottles scattered like fallen soldiers. The cargo hold has become both confessional and tomb, where corporate banality transformed into desperate survival, then into something worse. This nightmare sequence serves as a dark mirror of Jimmy's psychology. His inability to accept imperfection, his tendency towards violence as a solution, his rejection of Curly's philosophy of finding peace with what is. The cake, once a symbol of celebration and community, becomes in this dream a perverse communion, with Curly as both priest and sacrifice, offering wisdom that Jimmy can only answer with violence. We find ourselves surrounded by the Mouthwash once more, the cargo hold becoming their confessional. Daisuke sits just outside, a bottle of mouthwash, his chosen implement of penance. How many of you had? Those things will kill you before anything else, I know. Daisuke's usual optimism has crumbled to dust. My mom found this internship for me. Such a slacker, she said. I don't know, I just never knew what I wanted to be. Never was good at anything. Total screw up. We're not done yet, Daisuke. Jimmy's attempt at comfort rings hollow. I just hope she doesn't blame herself. Please, just take it. I don't want to look at this stuff anymore. He surrenders his bottle like a soldier laying down arms. Daisuke's breakdown reveals the cruel irony of his position. The intern who never chose this path, now trapped on it forever. His uncertainty about his future transformed into uncertainty about its end. His mother's attempt to give him direction has led him here, to this floor, to this bottle. The lounge has become their purgatory. Anya contemplates Mouthwash while Swansea performs his drunken dance of nihilism before the sunset display. There's medicine trapped behind foam, a perfect metaphor for their situation. Help exists, but reaching for it might kill them all. Jimbo, El Capitano, the man with the plan. Swansea's mockery cuts deep. You done? I need that. This whole thing, this was entrusted to me by our previous tragically inclined leader. Big responsibility. But you know all about that, huh? I'm gonna try and get some more painkillers. Do something useful, you know? Oh, I heard all about it. You're looking to pull the plug on this party early. I'm trying to save us. Take matters into your own hands. Be my guest. Swansea uses the axe and buries it deep into the massive display, the shattered display becoming another casualty of Swansea's bitter wisdom. Behind the foam, after using the axe to break it away, we find weak comfort. Paracetamol and isopropyl alcohol, tools inadequate for the task at hand. Jimmy's facade finally cracks when Anya asks him to medicate Curly again. You're not serious. Look, I've entertained your sentimentality up until now, but I'm actually trying to fix things, Anya. Take responsibility, flashes like Judgement. I'm getting us through this.
I...
But Jimmy is lost in his litany of duties. It's find the code scanner, then figure out the door code, get the axe, chop up the foam, but not too much, and best of all, give Curly his fucking medicine. But I'm bearing it, because the captain has to take fucking responsibility on this goddamn ship. Take responsibility becomes his mantra of madness. Go make sure Daisuke doesn't choke on his own vomit.
No, I can't.
I'll take care of it, Anya. I always do. At Curly's bedside, Jimmy's monologue reveals his transformation complete. I don't think I understood the pressure you were under before. Fuck. And you tried to tell me. Our worst moments don't make us monsters, huh? You were a good captain, Curly. And you'll be one again. I'll get us both through this. The darkness swallows his words, leaving only those terrible sounds of forced medication. When light returns, Curly's accusing stare says what his burned lips cannot. Jimmy hasn't taken responsibility. He's perverted it. His list of objectives isn't leadership, it's control. His promise to get us through this isn't salvation, it's possession. He's become captain not by earning the role, but by breaking everything and everyone around him until he's the only one left standing. The screen once more distorts and crashes until the words appear like a death sentence. 6 hours until Judgement. Blood red against darkness. We're back in the Tulpar's cockpit, but now it's a fortress about to fall. The door becomes our world. We lock it, knowing it won't be enough, knowing what's coming. The first impact makes the metal shudder. Jimmy, get the fuck out here! Swansea's voice carries years of rage finally unleashed. We scramble through the cockpit like trapped animals, desperate for anything that might buy us time. The rope we find feels pathetically inadequate as we bind the door, each loop of knot a prayer against the inevitable. You can't hide! The metal pipe comes next. Our hands shaking, we try to wedge it into place. Swansea's next words freeze the blood in our veins. I'm gonna chop you into 20 fucking pieces. The axe crashes through glass, sending fragments of safety spinning through the air. Swansea's arm snakes through the breach like something from a nightmare, reaching for the lock with terrible purpose. But before we can see what follows, before Judgement can truly fall, reality tears apart once more. The interruption feels less like mercy and more like torture, leaving us suspended in that moment of anticipation, knowing that when we return, there will be nowhere left to hide. Two days before metal meets asteroid, before flesh meets flame, Curly and Anya sit beneath artificial stars, a moment of quiet that carries the weight of everything unsaid. You doing okay? Curly's question touches the surface of deeper waters.
Yeah, can't sleep.
I know how that is. I just toss and turn, or stare at the ceiling all night.
I actually kinda like the nighttime window screen, if you can believe it, so I just come look at it sometimes.
Then offers her metaphor like a key to understanding.
If you look really, really close, you can see there's a dead pixel in the upper right corner.
That's so? Nope, don't see it. His failure to spot this flaw is more than oversight. It's prophecy.
In the back of my mind, it's always there.
She's not talking about pixels anymore. She's talking about Jimmy, about violation. Now I'll go bonkers looking for it. Cheers. His response is tragically light. I don't think it ruins the illusion though. It's peaceful. But maybe I'm just used to looking at the bigger picture. The irony cuts deep. His bigger picture blinds him to the immediate danger. Like the dead pixel, Jimmy's true nature sits in plain sight. Visible to those who know where to look, invisible to those who choose to see only stars.
How many days of transport do we have left?
Let's see. Off the top of my head, around 237 days, just under.
8 months.
Her next question carries desperate meaning.
Hey, why do you think Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door, but not in the sleeping quarters?
I suppose for the same reason they put a lock on the cockpit. Safety. The word hangs there, hollow and useless. What good are locked doors when the monster already walks among them? What good is a captain who can't see the dead pixel in his own command? Reality fractures again, hurling us 5 months into a future born from this moment of failed protection. The Tulpar's decay mirrors the rot that began here, in this quiet conversation about pixels and doors and safety that was never truly safe. As the screen fades back in, we find ourselves back in the decayed corridors of the Tulpar, as Daisuke's panic breaks the ship's hollow quiet. Don't panic. The words carry their own contradiction as we rush to medical, as he tells us of how Anya is stuck behind the medical door, about how she is stuck in that room accompanied by just a living corpse. As we reach medical, the door stands like a judgment between us and Anya, but something's wrong. Her calm feels like the eye of a storm. Hey, the lock's broken. Hey Anya, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jimmy.
The rest of our medicine stash is in there too. Damn, this could be bad. Did you try to really put your back into it? Any wrenches lying around? How heavy is the medkit? Anya, is the door stuck? Her response falls like an axe.
No.
Look, we're all stressed, but you can't go breaking down at every little hardship. Open the damn door. Jimmy's words carry the same controlling tone he's used since taking command, but this time they find no purchase. What follows is not breakdown, but revelation.
You were right. You were right all along. I should have done this from the beginning.
Her voice grows stronger with each word.
I always believed that our worst moments didn't define us, didn't make us beyond repair. You think I wanted this either? Make no mistake, this isn't my worst moment. Far from it. It's the best decision I'll ever make.
Open the door. Her response throws Jimmy's words back at him like weapons.
I'll take care of it.
Daisuke's fists ring against metal. Anya, what does that mean? Curly is still in there with her, right? Yeah, you don't think... The vent in utility offers hope, or at least the illusion of it. But Swansea stands guard over his domain, drunk on mouthwash and bitter philosophy. Utility, the only pathway that leads to medical, through that damaged vent. Swansea, we need your help. I know you said utility was dangerous, but Daisuke's plea breaks against Swansea's wall of refusal. I'm good right here, fellas. You know I'm not letting you in there. Off limits. Look, if there's any possibility. Jimbo, letting you scratch at that foam wall would be useless. You'd only tear this goddamn ship a new asshole. Nothing to be done about it. Bad luck. Tail missed the donkey. But, Swansea, this could be really bad. Just hear us out. Swansea's response veers into cosmic irony. We're God's hand-picked favorites on this here planet, I reckon. Means we get to name it. So let's hear it for Wake Rock. Whatever's going on anywhere else don't matter, since I'm the happiest man Wake Rock has ever seen. Let's just go, Daisuke. There's no point with him. Reality fractures once more. 8 hours until Judgement appears like a countdown to inevitable horror. Daisuke lays bleeding on a table, another price paid for Jimmy's attempts at control. The scene crystallizes how power shifts in desperate moments. Anya, who has been victim of others' choices, makes her final decision. Jimmy, who has demanded control, finds himself powerless before a locked door. Swansea, who seems lost in drunken rambling, speaks truth about their larger imprisonment. And through it all, Daisuke's innocent attempts at mediation lead him towards his own blood-soaked fate. Daisuke lies stretched across the table, bathed in emergency red light that makes it impossible to tell where his blood ends and the illumination begins. His uniform is shredded across his torso, revealing wounds where the vent's metal teeth tore into him. The damage spreads like a grotesque canvas, tears, punctures, and gashes, painting a picture of what happens when flesh meets jagged steel. His body twitches involuntarily, each movement sending fresh ripples of agony through his frame, his hands clenching and unclenching against the cold metal surface beneath him. Don't do anything. Stop. I can fix this. Jimmy's words echo with desperate authority over Daisuke's labored breathing. Why do you keep fucking saying that? Are you hearing yourself? Swansea's rage cuts through Jimmy's delusions of control. I'm sorry. Daisuke's apology comes between waves of pain. We still have disinfectant, right? The one from the extra medical stash? Get it, now. Jimmy's composure cracks. The cocktail, The cocktail? What are you blabbering about? That was your fault. You would never have. I had no choice. Even now, Jimmy reaches for excuses, for someone else to blame. You, useless, you goddamn fucking idiot. Swansea's fist finds the wall. There has to be something else. Our objective appears in blood red. Find disinfectant. The cargo hold entrance that we seek out has become a grave, the code scanner symbol where a name should be, as if the scanner itself might reveal whose deaths we're walking towards. But when we raise it, reality shifts back, the grave dissolving into familiar corridors as we descend into the cargo hold. This descent into the hold becomes a descent into nightmare. Stairs multiply like fractal patterns, leading everywhere and nowhere. The scanner's blue light reveals blood in the steps, each splash a breadcrumb in this labyrinth of consequences. Be quiet, commands the void. We're not alone in this maze. Something moves below, something that shouldn't exist. We play a deadly game of statue with it, moving when it's distant, freezing when it draws near. The code scanner becomes both salvation and curse, its blue light revealing what we need to see, but also what we wish we hadn't. When it finally shows itself, it's Polly, but wrong. The corporate mascot twisted into nightmare, its neck stretched and distorted, its eyes fixed on us with terrible purpose. A manifestation of corporate cheerfulness, corrupted by reality. The mouthwash, when we find it, feels like victory, but the take responsibility that flashes across our vision like laughter at a funeral. Back at Daisuke's side, we pour corporate cleanliness onto human wounds. Anya's earlier warning echoes, too sweet to disinfect, too weak to save. Daisuke's screams cut through darkness as sugar meets blood, as attempted salvation becomes just another form of torture. The scene captures Jimmy's desperate spiral, each attempt to fix things making them worse, each effort to avoid responsibility, creating new wounds to answer for. The twisted Polly pursuing us through the hold becomes a perfect metaphor. Corporate cheerfulness turned monstrous, hunting us through a maze of our own making, while we carry a scanner that forces us to see truths we'd rather avoid. Time slides backwards again, to the moment before metal tears flesh. Daisuke reveals to us about the vent that connects to medical and utility, with innocent certainty. A path through utility to medical, if only Swansea weren't standing guard. Jimmy's solution emerges almost too quickly, too precisely, as if he's done this before. A cocktail to remove the obstacle. The ingredients gather like evidence. Mouthwash surrendered by Daisuke in his moment of despair. Isopropyl alcohol scavenged from medical supplies. And sweetener. Daisuke's private stash. A small comfort he'd kept for himself. The same machine that once created celebration now mixes betrayal. When we approach Swansea, his words carry unintended prophecy. You taking the teaching my intern now? I personally try to educate based off years of experience. But that's just me, Captain. His suspicion surfaces at the sight of the drink. The fuck is that? Jimmy's response drips with false fellowship. Look, we need to keep working together. If this is how I can get us through this without us being at each other's necks all the time, then yeah, give it here. Swansea's acceptance seals more fates than just his own. As he collapses from our mixed concoction, we grab the utility key. It feels heavy with consequence as we claim it from his unconscious form. Inside utility, we find truth. The room barely touched by foam, a single cryopod still functional. Jimmy sees conspiracy where there was only care. He assumed Swansea planned to save himself, when in reality he was most likely saving hope for Daisuke. At the vent, Daisuke's hesitation speaks louder than his words, but Jimmy knows exactly which strings to pull. You said you could handle it. Swansea taught you well, right? Pride and validation, the perfect poison for youth's uncertainty. The darkness swallows Daisuke's movements until that singular scream tears through metal and time. His final words echo with horrible revelation. Anya, what did you do? Reality fractures again, hurling us back to Curly's perspective, one day before the crash, before the cocktail, before the vent, before all these careful manipulations would blossom into blood. One day before Metal meets Asteroid, as we return to Curly's perspective, we search for a gun, but we don't yet understand why. Curly's thoughts at the broken vent reveal his fundamental misunderstanding. It's still broken. She couldn't have hid it there. He's looking for a weapon, not yet realizing he's searching for evidence of his own failure. We find Anya in the cockpit, crouched like prey that's learned to recognize predators. Curly's response reveals everything wrong with his leadership. For fuck's sake, where is it? Us being let go isn't a reason to hurt yourself. Even now, he misreads everything. Anya, as our nurse, you never got psychovals. I should have thought of that. You could have come to me if you were feeling stressed. His concern is genuine, which makes it all the more tragic.
What would you have done?
Her question carries weight he doesn't yet feel. Anything, you, the crew, are all my responsibility. I told you so over and over, yeah. The words of a man who doesn't understand that his responsibility has already failed her.
I'm not going to hurt myself. You know the gun is in a safety case I can't open. But I hid the case itself.
She's protecting herself in the only way left to her. Tell me where it is. None of this has to be on our performance log. We'll figure it out together. His offer of bureaucratic protection against a threat he still doesn't comprehend. Reality strips away until there's only Anya, surrounded by void, a visual truth of her isolation. Then comes the revelation that changes everything.
I'm pregnant.
You're what? Who was you?
Captain, I told you.
3 words that indict his entire command. Listen to me, we can fix this. I've known him for a long time, I'll talk to him. Even now, faced with the horror of what Jimmy has done, Curly reaches for mediation rather than justice.
I know you'd never give me the gun to protect myself, so the least I can do is make sure he never gets it either.
The scene lays bare the complete moral failure of authority aboard the Tulpa. Jimmy, revealed as a sexual predator who assaulted his crew member, represents the worst kind of monster, one enabled by systems of power and protection. But Curly's failure is equally devastating in its way. When Anya says, "I told you," we understand that she had previously reported Jimmy's behavior, only to have Curly choose his friendship with Jimmy over his duty to protect his crew. Curly's response to learning about the assault and pregnancy, "We can fix this and I'll talk to him," reveals the poisonous nature of his conflict avoidance. He treats sexual assault as if it's a minor disagreement between friends, something that can be solved with a conversation. His instinct to protect Jimmy, to handle things quietly, to fix rather than punish, shows how institutional protection of abusers works in practice. Through well-meaning people who choose comfort over confrontation, who value their relationships with predators over justice for victims. The gun, which Anya has hidden, becomes a symbol of how thoroughly the system has failed her. She can't trust her captain to protect her, she can't trust the corporate structure to help her, can't even trust her right to defend herself. All she can do is ensure her abuser doesn't gain another weapon to use against her. As we turn to leave to find Jimmy, the screen's distortion feels like judgment. We return to Jimmy's perspective with new understanding. Everything that followed, from the crash to the horror, grew from this moment of institutional failure. This choice to protect the wrong person. This fundamental betrayal of trust and responsibility. As we return to Jimmy's perspective, standing over Daisuke's ruined and marred form, as Jimmy attempts to reason away the circumstances, Swansea ignores Jimmy's desperation and instead speaks softly to his dying intern. "Hey kid, you hear me?" Only wet, pained sounds answer. "Daisuke?" The axe in Swansea's hands rises, not with violence, but mercy. His voice softens further, becoming almost fatherly. "It's alright, Daisuke, calm down." Then comes his confession, each word heavy with years of regret. "This line of work, you could never have become like miserable old Swansea. What a tragedy. Decades of hauling ass for Pony Express. Big mighty bruiser with all his shiny tools. This is where it got me. The good life, huh?" He pauses, something like tenderness entering his voice. "I thought you were dumber than a can of paint. Always just chewing my ear off about nothing. Useless ray of goddamn sunshine. Not an ace student, career workhorse, or force of ambition. Just a damn good kid trying his best. You could have taught an old fool like me a lot." Close your eyes, Daisuke. The camera pulls back, leaving us in the doorway. Daisuke's sobs grow louder and louder until the axe falls, bringing silence. When our vision returns, the axe is buried in Daisuke's face. Jimmy's voice rises with hysteria. You monster! I could have fixed him, Swansea. I have to do everything myself. Why can't any of you just give me some time to fucking think?" Swansea turns, his eyes hard. How do you still not understand? It's over. End of the fucking line. He won't suffer one more second because of your delusions. Jimmy's paranoia spills out like bile. Unbelievable. Stop pretending. I know all about your plans, Swansea. I went to utility. I saw what you've been hiding down there. Sneaking around with that axe, telling Anya who knows what. Now this, you're making sure you're the one who gets inside that cryopod. Swansea's laugh carries dark knowledge. I sure did talk to Anya, but it was her telling me all sorts of things instead, wasn't it? His next words fall like judgment. Shouldn't a captain go down with his ship? Not that it matters anymore. I ain't got no place to be. I got everything I could ever want right here on this ship, so go ahead and get in that pod. If you ever get found, you can tell them whatever fucking story you like. You've earned it. The screen cuts to black. When light returns, Swansea is gone, and we have a new objective. Get the gun. In medical, we find more than Curly. Anya lies slumped against the curtains, finally beyond Jimmy's reach. The paracetamol meant for Curly became her escape route, choosing eternal sleep over another moment in this metal prison. Beneath Curly's bed, an open drawer reveals the gun case, empty without its code. We race through darkened halls to the cockpit, every shadow seeming to reach for us. The code, when we find it, feels like prophecy. Back in medical, the gun comes free just as Curly's laughter starts. Raw and unmedicated, a sound like broken glass. As we turn to leave, the door opens. There stands Swansea in the red-lit doorway, axe raised, fury incarnate. His screams echo through metal corridors. Jimmy! He charges forward, but before impact can come, reality fractures once more. Time compresses to its final moment, 0 days before metal meets void. We find Anya crouched by what will become Curly's prison, his deathbed, his penance. Her voice carries the weight of inevitability.
I told him.
Anya, you should have waited for me. What did he say? Curly's surprise reveals his persistent belief in control.
Nothing that makes any difference.
Her words carry more truth than she knows. Did he seem angry? Where did he go?
He just walked away. Curly, I don't want him in here anymore.
Even now at the precipice, Curly reaches for mediation. Hold on, fuck, just wait. I need to find him. Everything's gonna be okay. Strange sounds follow us through corridors as we search for Jimmy, finding him outside the cockpit like a waiting executioner. Jim, I can fix this. What do you think will happen when we get back, We can figure all of this out, you and me. Take care of it pulses across our vision as Jimmy continues. All I ever hear is how great of a leader you are. God, it's so annoying. But now, what do you think will happen now when we get back? We'll fix this together. Everything you and I worked for in our lives, accomplishments, changes, none of it will matter. Curly's response drips with tragic optimism. You've gotten through difficult situations before. This time won't be any different. Work through it one day at a time. It's not just me, is it? You were supposed to be the one who had everything under control. You said so yourself. This ship, this crew, everything that happened here, this was your responsibility, Captain. This is what you'll be hearing the rest of your life. Take responsibility flashes like accusation. All this can all be remembered as a tragedy. Despite what must have been the best efforts of its acclaimed captain, the Topaz crew was never found. No one survived to tell the tale. The camera shift reveals Curly's hull, unscarred, unknowing of the flesh he's about to lose. Jimmy's words become prophecy. You're standing at the top, feet in cement. I get it now, right? Right. Curly's single word seals 5 fates. Jimmy's hand on his arm feels like a brand. I'll take care of it. Take care of it pulses between them, a pact written in future blood. As he disappears and the world fades to black, we come back outside of the cockpit, Jimmy now gone, as system failure floods the screen. Rush through the corridors to get to the cockpit, and we find Jimmy collapsed outside, his silence louder than any alarm. Jim, tell me you didn't. I didn't. What the fuck did you do? His silence is confession. The truth reveals itself. Not Curly's accident, but Jimmy's deliberate act, a final attempt to erase his crimes through collective destruction. The cockpit becomes a cathedral of warning lights, crash imminent, their central hymn. The white that follows isn't salvation, but annihilation. Metal meeting void, flesh meeting flame, truth meeting consequence. The moment crystallizes every failure aboard the Topaz. Curly's persistent belief that everything can be fixed through mediation enables Jimmy's worst impulses. Jimmy's manipulation transforms his own crimes into collective punishment, and trapped between them, Anya's truth becomes a catalyst for catastrophe. Not because she spoke it, but because the men who heard it chose destruction over accountability. One hour before Judgement, and Jimmy carries Curly into their final celebration. The lounge has become a theatre of the absurd. The birthday party recreated as nightmare, each dead crew member propped in their seats like dolls at a child's tea party. Daisuke with his ex-wound legacy, Anya forever quiet from her chemical escape, Swansea marked by Jimmy's bullets. All wearing party hats in grotesque festivity. Their corpses seem to animate as Jimmy arranges his audience. Swansea raises his eternal toast of mouthwash, while Anya requests a speech that will never come.
You have to give a speech.
Instead, Jimmy reaches for the cake knife, the same blade that once cut celebration, now poised for destruction. The sawing motion mirrors that earlier moment of division, but now it's flesh instead of cake, bone instead of frosting. Static crawls across our vision as screams build in the distance, until finally, separation. Curly's leg becomes the main course in this feast of madness. Jimmy's monologue pours out like poison. A lot of people struggle to put food on their plates. But that wasn't enough, right, Captain? The lowest rung of your ladder is our highest. Until it was all swept out from under your feet. Life isn't even worth living at the same level as us. But I forgive you. All of us do. I won't give up on you, even like this. I believe in you. We're going to make it through this. The camera pulls back to reveal the full horror. A family dinner in hell. Dead crew members seated around the table, each with their plates of human flesh, while blood pools from Curly's fresh amputation. It's a perversion of communion, a mockery of every meal they've shared before. Sometimes we thrive, travel the endless reaches of space, but other times we just have to accept days like these. You told me that, Curly. Let's eat. Let's survive. Once marked their fracture as a crew, now becomes a funeral feast where the living feed on the dead. Each party hat is a crown of thorns, each plate an altar. Each dead crew member a witness to Jimmy's final transformation into the monster that we always knew he was. The red light bathes everything in blood, turning his moment of celebration into a tableau of damnation. As reality distorts, we're left with an image that encapsulates every failure aboard the Tulpa. A captain being devoured by the very person he enabled, surrounded by the consequences of his inaction, all of them trapped forever in this moment of grotesque communion. Take responsibility pulses across our vision as we follow Blood to Medical. The bay has transformed into a grotesque theatre, curtains like shrouds, blood like paint, and there in that broken vent that claimed Daisuke, a key dangles over darkness, the same vent Jimmy forced Daisuke through, knowing all along it was traversable if careful. The descent into the vent becomes a descent into Jimmy's psyche. Industrial equipment gives way to symbols of his victims, Daisuke's shadow retreating into blood-red light, each backward step revealing more tokens of the dead. Flowers for Anya's lost innocence, a gaming device marking Daisuke's youth, weights suggesting Swansea's burden. A note reads, "No turning back," mocking us from vent walls, while ghostly faces demand we take responsibility. The path twists impossibly, sideways doors leading to forests, corporate posters wallpapering gravity-defying corridors, axes embedded in walls like accusations. Each vent, each drop, each impossible space maps Jimmy's actual journey, from medical to utility, from utility to cockpit, from escape to confrontation. The path he forced Daisuke through becomes his own road to judgment. Finally, we fall into a graveyard. In this mausoleum of memory, Daisuke's photos flank our battle with Swansea's spectres. 3 shots to silence guilt, 3 shots to reach truth. But truth waits in a white void, where silhouettes tell the real story. Swansea's bound, Jimmy standing over him, the gun completing their triangle of judgment. I have something to say, so shut the fuck up and listen. Swansea's monologue cuts through pretense. I spent 13 years half cut up to my eyeballs, drunk, to put it mildly. Then suddenly I saw it, a streetlight shining in my face. 500 gigawatts of the power of God. A vision of my bloated body found in some ditch. Scared me straight. Each word strips away illusion. So I got a collar shirt, mortgage, and a credit card. All the things that make a good man. I hoped I could raise my children to be better than their old man. I wanted to believe I was never one setback away from my worst self. His confession becomes accusation. But the truth is, discipline, drive, routine, the endless fucking desperation to get shit done, a loving wife, great kids, sobriety, I'm telling you, accomplishments. I've been chasing all my life, never felt as good as I expected when I crossed the finish line. The truth pours out like blood from Daisuke's wounds. So now that we're at the end, taking inventory. Those days spent spinning out of my head, sinking into the sofa, broken glass in my palms, bleeding dry the funniest thing ever. Old dogs laughing and snarling on a waterbed floor, mocking the moon for daring to show its face. All nausea and wreckage and vomit and ugly cruelty. The only problem in this world, an empty bottle. Those were the best days of my life. Yeah, those were the best days of my life. His final judgment lands like an axe. I got nothing to hide, ready to face the music. I can see myself for what I am, but you, a cowardly, selfish motherfucker, and you can't even see it. I should have been able to protect the kid. If I could have done one thing right, I wish I had been to give him one small chance of this goddamn rock. Jimmy clings to his mantra. Swansea, I'm gonna fix everything. We're gonna make it. Fuck you. The gun rises. Take responsibility flashes one final time. Not command, but condemnation. After Swansea's execution, reality continues to unravel. The topaz corridors twist into impossible geometries, each turn defying the ship's known architecture. Through the grated floor, Curly's face watches, compressed, distorted, but always staring. His eyes become our compass in this maze of madness. The walls sprout eyes like tumors, each one tracking our movement. Their wet sounds of formation, squelch, blink, stare, create a symphony of judgment. We spiral endlessly, walking circles in spaces, until something in reality itself gives way. The corridor transforms into organic horror, a tunnel of flesh lined with blue veins, pulsing with someone's breath. Following this grotesque path leads to revelation. We've been walking through a massive curly thing, his form stretched and warped, mouth forever frozen in a scream. The metal platform beyond feels like escape, but it only leads to worse truth. Here sits another Curly, a different Curly, or maybe the same Curly, plugged into machinery like a broken puppet. Valves protrude from his body like mechanical parasites, and before him a television plays a mockery of normality. A cartoon about Mother Goose's party, 4 figures around a cake. The image freezes like a photograph of better times, before all of this began. The television offers us a choice that isn't really a choice. Take Curly's leg. Feast appears like command, followed by stark footage of meat consumption. The forced feeding that follows is a ritual of horror. Each valve must be turned precisely, each chunk of flesh guided through Curly's system, while monitors display the grotesque journey. His body rejects truth with violence, vomit coating his torso when we fail, blood flowing when we succeed. Success brings transformation. The television becomes confession booth. Help me pleads across the screen as we find ourselves controlling Jimmy through a starfield, walking towards burning truth. We find Curly reefed in flames, not memory but metaphor, his burning form the physical manifestation of what Jimmy did to him. I want to go home, Curly pleads. We are home. Jimmy's response reveals his complete break from reality. Why don't you finish what you started? Don't worry, if anyone ever finds us, I'll still be playing the villain. You'll be the better man in the end, like you wanted. I could have stopped it. I'm taking responsibility. Jimmy collapses before this burning icon of his sins. No, we can both be heroes. We're a team, just you and me, like we used to be. His face finds his hands as truth finally breaks through. What happened was an accident. We were trapped. I made a mistake, alright? I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, Curly. The camera pulls back, reality fractures, but the image remains. Jimmy kneeling before the burning evidence of his crimes, finally speaking truth, but far too late for it to matter. His apology only comes in this nightmare space, where Curly burns it. The vents have transformed into something organic. Flesh grows along metal walls like cancer, turning corporate infrastructure into living tissue. Our ultrasound device becomes a tool for terrible revelation, scanning these growths for the truth growing within. First we find Polly, the corporate mascot trapped like a fetus in this mechanical womb, but it vanishes, refusing to be pinned down by observation, forcing us to search again. The second scan brings eyes, countless eyes emerging from the flesh, while a baby's cries build in the distance. The sound isn't coincidence. This is Anya's unborn child haunting the spaces between metal and meat. The third scan never completes. The crying reaches unbearable intensity as our equipment fails, emergency lights strobing in rhythm with infant screams. The groves open their eyes in unison as Polly emerges, not the friendly corporate mascot, but something twisted by truth, elongated by horror, a being that should not exist, rushing through spaces too small to contain it. All clean, Jimmy's voice mocks from the darkness. Really gets rid of that bad taste in your mouth, huh? Through wreckage, through silence, wash it away. All day fire fresh. The mantra reveals the game's central metaphor. Mouthwash as facade, chemical freshness masking rot beneath. Just as mouthwash can't cure decay, only hide it, Jimmy's attempts to fix everything only mask the horror he's created. Each action, each justification becomes another swish of mint over murder. Above us, the ultimate perversion of corporate comfort walks. Polly transformed into centipede fetus thing, a creature born from the marriage of corporate policy and human atrocity. The chase through endless vents becomes metaphor for Jimmy's futile attempts to escape consequences. Left, right, left again. But there's no outrunning what grows inside the walls, what gestates in the spaces between responsibility and denial. When it finally catches us, the darkness that follows isn't escape, but birth. Delivery onto another dark corridor, another level of truth. We haven't escaped, we've only gone deeper into the body, deeper into Jimmy's broken psyche, deeper into horror that wears a smiling mascot's face. The corridor we walk through fills with ID cards, badges of identity, of responsibility, of roles assigned and betrayed. They cover everything like wallpaper made of guilt, while voices murmur truths too terrible to hear clearly. At the bottom of stairs lined with empty mouthwash bottles, symbols of attempted cleansing that never reached the root of rot, we find our final judgment. Polly sits atop a mountain of mouthwash, the corporate mascot finally speaking the truths no one else can. Pony Express is dead, and so are you. Jimmy's denial continues even now. Against the moon, Polly becomes judge, jury, and witness. Jimmy's words spill out like confession. Shut up, Curly tried his best. I did too, but he's the better man. I see that now. We can both still make it. I'll take care of him. I'm taking responsibility. Curly, Captain, I'm so sorry. Yes, I do. I fucked up, but I can still make this right. Our worst moments don't make us. Polly's interruption cuts to the heart of Jimmy's delusion. The question shatters everything because it reveals Jimmy's final desperate evasion. His fixation on Curly, on being the better man, on taking responsibility, on making things right, is itself another form of mouthwash, another attempt to mask deeper rot. He focuses obsessively on Curly because Curly is the safe victim, the one whose suffering he can frame as tragic necessity, as shared sacrifice between friends. But what about Anya? What about the sexual assault, the pregnancy, the desperate suicide to escape his presence? What about Daisuke, manipulated into entering dangerous vents in service of Jimmy's schemes? What about Swansea, who saw through him and died for it? Jimmy's theatrical remorse over Curly becomes his final act of cowardice, a way to avoid facing his true crimes, his real victims. His repeated invocation of taking responsibility rings hollow because he's still choosing which responsibility to take. He'd rather be the tragic figure who hurt his friend than face being the monster who destroyed everyone around him. Even his apologies become selective, carefully choosing which sins to confess while burying others beneath mountains of mouthwash. The final journey through the Tulpa feels like a funeral procession. We carry Curly through corridors that no longer make sense, his laboured breathing marking time like a broken metronome. The ship itself seems to breathe with him, walls pulsing with fleshy growths, Jimmy's broken psyche made manifest in metal and meat. Go home, the objective reads, but home stopped existing the moment Jimmy turned the ship towards that asteroid. All that's left is this long walk through decay, soft rain falling somewhere impossible, as if the void itself weeps for what's been lost. The cryopod waits in utility, like an open coffin, spotlight creating a stage for the final act of Jimmy's performance. The walls still throb with organic horror, but the pod promises clean lines and dreamless sleep. When we place Curly inside, our perspective shifts. Now we see through his eyes, through bandages and burns, as Jimmy delivers his final monologue. "It's okay, Curly. You're gonna be okay." Through Curly's ruined gaze, we see our own broken body, flesh transformed by Jimmy's choices into something barely human. "You always had my back. I ended up hurting you even though I was trying to save us. But now you'll survive." Each word drips with selective remembrance, with carefully curated guilt. It's like you said, together we can fix anything. I'm just proud I got to be your friend and co-pilot, Captain. No one can hurt you now. We fixed it. I fixed it. As frost creeps across our vision, Jimmy's final act plays out in light and sound. A flash, a gunshot, then silence. His suicide becomes his last evasion, choosing a clean death over the messier work of true accountability. He saves Curly, but leaves him frozen with the weight of witness, the sole survivor who will carry the truth of what happened aboard the Tulpa. The music rises as ice claims us completely. Somewhere in the void, a ship drifts with its cargo of corporate mouthwash and human consequence. Inside, a cryopod holds a man who will wake in 20 years with burns that will never heal. Outside, 4 bodies cool in the artificial night. Anya, who died rather than endure. Daisuke, whose trust became his undoing. Swansea, who saw too clearly. And Jimmy, who chose what truths to face and what to wash away. The credits roll over this tableau of selective salvation. One man saved, but at the cost of all the truths Jimmy couldn't bear to face. His final act of responsibility becomes just another way to avoid it, leaving Curly frozen not just in time, but in the role of witness to horrors that Mouthwash could never clean away. While Mouthwashing initially presents itself as a story of survival horror in space, its true terror emerges from 2 intertwining sources: the dehumanizing systems that trap its characters, and the deeply human capacity for both cruelty and cowardice that those systems enable. This is not simply a critique of corporate culture, it's an examination of how institutional pressures and personal failures feed into each other, creating perfect conditions for horror. The game's power lies in its understanding that monsters aren't created by corporations alone. Jimmy's predatory nature existed before the crash, just as Curly's moral weakness preceded his captaincy. What the corporate environment does is provide cover for these human failings, creating a maze of protocols and power dynamics that allow personal evils to flourish unchecked. Anya's assault happened not just because of an inadequate corporate protection, but because of Curly's very human desire to avoid confrontation with his friend. Swansea's cynicism stems not just from years of corporate grinding, but from his own bitter recognition of human nature. To fully understand Mouthwashing's horror, we must examine both its systemic and personal elements, how the ship's architecture and corporate hierarchy create pressure cookers for human darkness, how individual choices become magnified by institutional power, and how the intersection of personal and systemic failures creates something more terrifying than either could achieve alone. Through this dual lens, we can see how Mouthwashing transcends simple corporate critique to deliver a devastating portrait of human nature under pressure, where the true monster isn't the company or any individuals, but the ways in which they enable and amplify each other's worst potential. The Tulpa isn't just a vessel drifting through space, it's a perfect microcosm of the modern workplace, where corporate hierarchy and power dynamics play out in a confined environment that magnifies their impact. The ship's design itself tells a story of corporate control and class division. At the top sits the cockpit, the executive suite, where Captain Curly and co-pilot Jimmy exercise their authority over navigation and decision making. This elevated position isn't just physical, it represents the separation between management and labor, a divide divide that becomes literally sealed by emergency foam after the crash, just as corporate disasters often isolate leadership from consequence. Below we find the medical bay and utility section, where Anya and Swansea respectively carry out their specialised roles. These spaces become territories, with access controlled by codes and scanners, corporate gatekeeping made physical. Swansea's stubborn protection of utility access mirrors middle management's territorial behaviour, while Anya's medical bay transforms from a place of healing into a fortress of last resort when corporate protection fails her. The common area serves as a stage for corporate theatre. The lounge with its artificial sunset display represents the company's attempt to simulate normalcy in an inherently abnormal environment. It becomes a perfect metaphor for corporate attempts to maintain morale through artificial means. The birthday celebration that takes place here, with its recycled cake mix and forced camaraderie, exemplifies the hollow rituals of workplaces' culture. Throughout these spaces, Polly, the corporate mascot, maintains constant surveillance through omnipresent posters and statues. His transformation from cheerful company symbol to nightmarish pursuer tracks perfectly with the game's revelation of corporate horror hiding behind friendly facades. The posters about teamwork and productivity take on an increasingly sinister tone as the crew's situation deteriorates, becoming wallpaper for their descent into violence. The revelation that the Tulpar's entire cargo consists of mouthwash serves as the game's masterstroke of corporate critique. This seemingly mundane product carries enormous symbolic weight in the narrative. Consider the sheer absurdity. 5 human lives dedicated to transporting a product designed to temporarily mask bad breath. A perfect metaphor for attempts to sanitize deeper problems rather than address their root causes. The mouthwash cargo serves as a rich tapestry of symbolic meaning within the narrative. As a corporate waste, the sheer volume of product requiring a year-long journey with a full crew represents the fundamentally wasteful nature of corporate production. The fact that this will be their final journey before layoffs adds bitter irony. Their last act of labour is transporting a product of ultimate superficiality. The cargo also functions as a failed solution throughout the story. When Daisuke is injured, they attempt to use the mouthwash as disinfectant, but its sugar content makes it worse. A perfect metaphor for how solutions often exacerbate the problems they claim to solve. The crew's eventual consumption of it for its alcohol content represents their desperate attempt to find value in meaningless corporate products. Most tellingly, the very purpose of mouthwash, to clean away bad tastes and kill bacteria, mirrors Jimmy's attempts to clean away his crimes and responsibilities. Just as mouthwash provides only temporary freshness while decay continues beneath, Jimmy's efforts to fix situations only mask the rot at the core of his actions. The crew's relationship with the cargo evolves into a dark metaphor for corporate control, as their eventual dependence on mouthwash for its alcohol content represents how corporations create and maintain dependency in their workers. What begins as cargo becomes sustenance, then addiction, then poison, tracking the way corporate systems often transform from opportunity to trap. The cargo hold itself becomes a cathedral of corporate waste, its endless rows of identical boxes stretching into darkness like a monument to meaningless production. When the crew finally breaks into it, hoping for salvation, they find only this, an ocean of artificial freshness that can't clean away the horror of their situation. The fact that this revelation comes after we learn of the company's impending closure adds the final bitter note. All this cargo, all this journey, ultimately means nothing in the face of corporate decision-making. The physical embodiment of waste serves as this perfect backdrop to the game's exploration of how systems dehumanize workers. Just as the mouthwash serves no real purpose beyond temporarily masking symptoms, the crew's labour becomes increasingly meaningless as their situation deteriorates. Their jobs, their protocols, their hierarchy, all of it becomes as superficial as the product they're transporting, unable to address or prevent the real horror unfolding in their midst. At its heart, Mouthwashing is a deeply human story about friendship, betrayal, cowardice, and the choices we make when faced with uncomfortable truths. While the story takes place in a corporate space setting, the real horror comes from watching relationships unravel and people fail at each other in devastating ways. Jimmy embodies one of horror's most disturbing archetypes, the monster who sees himself as the hero. His story reveals how a person's desperate need to maintain their self-image as good can lead them to commit increasingly terrible acts while never losing the conviction of their own righteousness. What makes Jimmy truly frightening isn't just what he does, but how he justifies it to himself and others. His relationship with Curly forms the tragic core of his character. Jimmy simultaneously resents and yearns for Curly's approval, seeing him as both father figure and rival. We see this complex dynamic play out in their pre-crash conversation about ambition, where Jimmy's bitterness about still climbing and climbing, while Curly stands at the top, reveals his deep-seated insecurities. Yet even as he resents Curly's success, he desperately wants to prove himself worthy of it. The assault of Anya represents Jimmy's first major act of violence, but crucially, he refuses to see it as such. When she becomes pregnant, his response is telling. He doesn't face what he's done, but instead sees it as a problem to take care of. This phrase becomes his mantra throughout the game, a euphemism that allows him to distance himself from the reality of his actions. He's not assaulting someone, he's taking care of a situation. He's not crashing the ship, he's taking care of a problem. He's not murdering his crewmates, he's taking care of their suffering. The birthday party scene serves as a perfect microcosm of Jimmy's character. When Curly reveals the company's closure, Jimmy's reaction is telling. He immediately frames himself as the victim, saying Curly can escape while leaving them behind. This reveals his fundamental inability to see others as full people rather than extensions of his own narrative. Even in this moment of collective crisis, he can only see how it affects him and his relationship with Curly. As the situation deteriorates, Jimmy's delusions only grow stronger. He manipulates Daisuke by playing on the young man's desire to prove himself. He drugs Swansea under the guise of making peace. Each act of violence is wrapped in a narrative of necessity and good intentions. When he forces medication down Curly's throats, he frames it as care rather than torture. He genuinely sees himself as the only one capable of fixing their situation, even as he makes it progressively worse. The sequence of him feeding Curly his own leg becomes the ultimate expression of his twisted psychology. He frames cannibalism as survival, torture as care, and his own monstrosity as necessity. His monologue during this scene about making Curly understand life at their level reveals how his resentment has formed into a perverse desire to drag others down to where he sees himself. Jimmy's hallucinations throughout the game serve a dual purpose. They both reflect this deteriorating mental state and reveal his deeper nature. The twisted version of Polly, the corporate mascot that pursues him, represents his fear of being seen for what he is. His visions of Curly in flames reflect not just guilt, but his desire to be seen as a savior, even as he destroys. What makes Jimmy's character particularly haunting is how familiar his pattern of self-justification feels. His constant refrain of "I had no choice and I'm trying to save us" reveals how people can commit horrible acts while maintaining their self-image as the hero of their own story. His final act, putting Curly in the cryopod before killing himself, becomes the ultimate expression of this self-delusion. He dies believing he's made a noble sacrifice, that he's saved his friend, when in reality he's merely preserved a witness to his monstrosity. Curly's tragedy stems from a very human weakness, the tendency to avoid difficult confrontations in hopes that the problem will resolve themselves. His failure isn't one of malice, but of moral courage, and his story shows how this kind of passive complicity can be just as destructive as active malevolence. The layers of Curly's character reveal themselves gradually through the game's fragmented timeline. Initially presented as a respected leader, we come to understand that his reputation for being a great captain rests partly on his ability to maintain peace through avoidance rather than resolution. His response to learning of Jimmy's assault of Anya, "We can fix this, I'll talk to him," reveals both his fundamental misunderstanding of the situation's gravity and his reflexive retreat to ineffective half measures. The game presents a brutal irony in Curly's character arc. He prides himself on seeing the bigger picture, yet consistently fails to see what's going on right in front of him. This is symbolized perfectly in his conversation with Anya about the dead pixel on the night sky display. While she can't stop seeing this flaw, Curly admits he can't see it at all, a metaphor for his willful blindness to the danger Jimmy represents. Curly's relationship with Jimmy is particularly complex. Having helped Jimmy get the job and covered for him in the past, Curly feels a responsibility that paradoxically prevents him from taking real responsibility. His desire to protect his friend becomes a form of enabling, and his belief that everything can be resolved through discussion becomes a way of avoiding necessary but painful action. His physical transformation after the crash serves as a grotesque manifestation of his moral failure. Rendered immobile, unable to speak, forced to be fed by others, his condition mirrors his earlier paralysis in the face of evil. Just as he once couldn't bring himself to act against Jimmy's crimes, now he literally cannot act at all. His burns become a physical manifestation of what happens when we let problems burn, rather than confronting them directly. The final cruel irony of Curly's fate is that his survival in the cryopod ensures he'll have to live with the consequences of his inaction. He becomes the witness not just to Jimmy's final acts of violence, but to the full scope of what his own moral cowardice helped enable. His story serves as a warning about how good intentions and conflict avoidance can pave the way for catastrophe. From the moment we meet her, Anya stands apart from the crew of the Tulpa, not because she's the only woman, or because she's mocked for being unable to feed Curly his meds, but because she alone seems to perceive the true nature of their situation. Her story is not just about victimhood, but about the terrible burden of awareness in a world committed to denial. The dead pixel conversation serves as Anya's defining moment. Late at night, she confides in Curly about a flaw in the night sky display, a single dead pixel that mars the illusion of stars. While others have learned to ignore it, she cannot. In the back of my mind, it's always there, she tells him. When Curly strains but fails to see it, claiming he prefers to look at the bigger picture, the scene becomes a perfect metaphor for their larger tragedy. Like the pixel, Jimmy's true nature is visible to her, but ignored by others. Her awareness of flaws others choose not to see isolates her, while Curly's inability to spot this pixel mirrors his willful blindness to deeper problems. Long before the crash, Anya tried to warn others about Jimmy. The game hints at previous reports to Curly, suggesting a pattern of her concerns being dismissed or minimized. Her professional competence is questioned precisely because she sees too clearly. Her aversion to blood isn't weakness, but a response to trauma. Her hesitation isn't competence, but awareness of danger. In her conversations with Swansea, we see brief moments of mutual understanding. They share observations about their situation, but even this connection highlights her isolation. Seeing the truth together still doesn't lead to action that could prevent tragedy. When Anya reveals her pregnancy to Curly, it represents more than just personal trauma. It becomes a grotesque timer counting down to disaster. She's literally carrying the physical manifestation of Jimmy's violence within her, trapped with the growing evidence of what he's done to her. This biological imprisonment mirrors her larger situation, trapped on the ship with her attacker, with those who failed to protect her, with no escape but the most final one. Her handling of this revelation shows her clear understanding of everyone's true nature. She tells Curly privately, giving him one last chance to act. She hides the gun to prevent its use against her or her unborn child. She anticipates correctly that Curly will try to fix things through ineffective half measures. Anya's choice of the medical bay for her final act carries deep significance. This space that represented her professional weakness becomes the site of her strongest assertion of will. By locking herself inside, she transformed a place of supposed healing into a fortress against further harm. The medical supplies that were meant to sustain life became her tools for choosing its end. The sequence leading to her suicide shows careful, deliberate agency. She waits until the right moment, denying Jimmy the chance to fix the situation. She chooses to die in her own territory, not the common spaces where others defined her. She uses her professional tools for her own purpose, rather than having them used on her. Her suicide represents more than escape. It's a final assertion of her narrative over Jim. While he frames every action as taking care of situations, her death is the one situation he cannot retroactively justify or control. She denies him the chance to craft a story about saving her or fixing things. Her belief that our worst moments don't make us monsters becomes brutally ironic when Jimmy later twists it to justify his actions. Even in death, she maintains the humanity that others abandoned, understanding that while worst moments don't define us, they do reveal us. Anya's death serves as the catalyst that brings the crew's underlying tensions to the surface. She becomes a tragic figure whose warnings were ignored until it was too late. An innocent victim of violence who saw her fate coming but could not escape it. Her story is ultimately about how awareness of evil people provides no protection from it, and how the clearest eyes often belong to those most vulnerable to harm. She dies not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to see clearly when everyone else chose comfortable blindness. In the end, her death represents not just an escape from horror, but a final testament to the cost of being the one person brave enough to acknowledge the truth. Swansea stands as perhaps the most tragic figure in Mouthwashing's ensemble, a man whose bitter exterior marks profound understanding and humanity. His cynicism isn't the hollow performances of someone trying to appear worldly, it's the hard-earned wisdom of someone who has seen too much and understands too well. From our first encounters with him, Swansea presents as difficult and antagonistic. He constantly berates Daisuke, guards the utility room jealously, and maintains a prickly distance from his crewmate. But as the story unfolds, we begin to understand that his harshness comes from a place of protective instinct rather than pure misanthropy. His relationship with Daisuke reveals the depths beneath his gruff surface. While he constantly criticizes the young intern's work, his actions betray deeper concern. He tries to keep Daisuke away from dangerous areas, attempts to shield him from Jimmy's manipulations, and shows genuine distress when these efforts fail. The tragedy of their relationship ties in how Swansea's attempt to protect through harshness ultimately can't save Daisuke from Jimmy's more insidious forms of kindness. The game hints at Swansea's deeper understanding through small moments. He's the only one who seems to grasp Jimmy's true nature from the beginning, shown through his reluctance to let Jimmy into certain spaces and his quiet conversations with Anya. His drinking, rather than simple addiction, becomes a way of coping with truths others won't face. The utility room becomes symbolic of Swansea's protective nature. He guards it not from petty territoriality, but because he understands its dangers. When he refuses to let others enter, it's not spite, but an attempt to prevent harm. This makes it all the more tragic when Jimmy uses deception to gain access, leading directly to Daisuke's fatal injury. This cocktail scene with Jimmy reveals both his awareness and his ultimate powerlessness. Even as he drinks the drug mixture, his bitter comments suggest he knows what's happening but feels unable to prevent it. This moment encapsulates his larger tragedy, seeing clearly but not being able to stop the approaching disaster. The mercy killing of Daisuke represents Swansea's defining moment. After Daisuke is mortally wounded in the vents, Swansea faces a truth that others won't. There's no saving him, and prolonging his suffering would be cruel. His decision to end Daisuke's life quickly comes from the same clear-sighted compassion that informed all his actions. The scene is particularly powerful because we finally understand that his previous harshness towards Daisuke was an attempt to protect him from exactly this fate. His final confrontation with Jimmy becomes the story's moment of absolute truth. Bound and facing death, Swansea delivers a monologue that strips away all pretense. He speaks about his years of alcoholism, not with shame, but with a strange pride. Those days of bleeding dry, the funniest thing ever, were real in a way that his later attempts at respectability never were. When he tells Jimmy, "I got nothing to hide, ready to face the music. I can see myself in what I am. But you, a cowardly, selfish motherfucker, and you don't even see it." He's speaking the truth that's been present but unspoken throughout the story. In his last moments, Swansea expresses his deepest regret. "I should have been able to protect the kid. If I could have done one thing right, I wish it had been to give him one small chance with this goddamn rock." This reveals that beneath all his cynicism and bitterness lay a fundamental desire to protect, to save, to prevent harm, even if his methods seemed harsh. The cruel irony of Swansea's story is that his clear sight and protective instincts prove inefficient against Jimmy's capacity for manipulation and violence. His attempts to shield Daisuke through harshness can't compete with Jimmy's false kindness. His awareness of danger can't prevent it. Even his decision to mercy kill Daisuke, while sparing the young man further suffering, still represents a kind of defeat. He can only protect by ending, can only save by destroying. Swansea emerges as a character whose apparent misanthropy masks deeper humanity, whose harshness comes from caring too much rather than too little. He sees the truth and tries to protect others from it, only to find that his protective barriers, whether physical ones like the utility room door, or emotional ones like his gruff exterior, ultimately can't stop the horror from getting in. His story suggests that sometimes the clearest eye belongs to the bitterest voices, and that cynicism can be its own form of care. Daisuke's tragedy lies in how his best qualities, his optimism, his eagerness to help, his fundamental belief in others, becomes the very things that lead to his destruction. Among the crew of the Tulpa, he stands as the embodiment of innocent corrupted, not through any flaw in his character, but through others' exploitation of his virtues. From our earliest encounters with Daisuke, his youth and enthusiasm shine through. He approaches his internship with genuine excitement, even in the face of Swansea's constant criticism. His response to difficulty isn't resentment, but increased determination. When Swansea berates him, he tries harder. When faced with challenges, he maintains his optimism. My mom will straight up stuff me when I get back, he says during their food crisis, still believing in a future beyond their current nightmare. His relationship with Swansea reveals both his resilience and his vulnerability. While Swansea constantly criticizes him, calling him dumber than a can of paint, Daisuke responds with genuine attempts to connect. It's okay to be big, boss. My gramps was super huge and he lived until like 60. These moments of attempted connection, even in the face of rejection, show his persistent belief in the possibility of friendship and understanding. The cruel irony is that Jimmy, the person who shows him the most apparent kindness, becomes the architect of his destruction. Where Swansea's harshness comes from a place of protection, Jimmy's false kindness serves only to manipulate. When Jimmy needs access to the medical bay, he plays perfectly on Daisuke's desire to help and prove himself worthy. His manipulation works perfectly because Daisuke wants to believe in people, wants to be useful, wants to make a difference. The vent scene becomes the terrible culmination of this dynamic. Despite his valid concerns about safety, Daisuke allows himself to be convinced because he trusts Jimmy's guidance. You said you could handle it. Swansea taught you well, right? Jimmy's words prey perfectly on Daisuke's desire for validation and his wish to prove his competence. His final moments in the vent, realizing too late the truth about Anya, about Jimmy, about everything, become even more tragic when they stem from his attempt to help. There's devastating symbolism in how Daisuke dies, injured while trying to help others, in pain from wounds sustained following someone he trusted, with only Swansea, the person who tried to protect him through harshness, there to offer final comfort. His last conversation with Swansea reveals the full depth of his innocent worldview. Even when facing death, he worries about his mother's reaction, showing how he remained fundamentally connected to normal life, even in their extreme situation. Swansea's mercy killing of Daisuke represents the story's darkest irony. The gruff mentor who tried to protect him through harshness must now protect him through death, while Jimmy manipulated Daisuke with false kindness that led to suffering. Swansea shows true kindness through an act of apparent cruelty. His final words to Daisuke, speaking softly, offering comfort, reveal the care that lay beneath his harsh exterior all along. The tragedy of Daisuke extends beyond his death. His mother found this internship for him, hoping to give him direction. Such a slacker, she said. I don't know, I just never knew what I wanted to be. Never was good at anything. Total screw-up. He confides early in the story. But in his final moments, we see that he wasn't a screw-up at all. He was simply someone whose genuine desire to help and connect made him vulnerable to those who would exploit such qualities. Swansea's bitter regret, I should have been able to protect the kid, gains extra weight when we understand that Daisuke never needed protection from incompetence or laziness, but from those who would use his eagerness to help against him. His name, meaning mediator, becomes tragically appropriate. He tried to bridge divides between crew members, tried to help everyone, only to be destroyed by the very people he tried to connect with. Daisuke's story serves as the game's clearest indictment of how innocence and goodwill can be weaponized by those with darker intentions. His death isn't just the loss of a young life, but the destruction of possibility itself, of optimism, of trust, of the belief that helping others is worthwhile. When Swansea says he wishes he could have given Daisuke one small chance, it's not just about survival, but about preserving that fundamental goodness that made Daisuke who he was. In the end, Daisuke's tragedy isn't that he was naive or foolish, but that his best qualities, his willingness to help, his trust in others, his desire to prove himself worthy, became the tools of his destruction. His story suggests that in a world of Jimmy's manipulations and Curly's weakness, sometimes the most dangerous thing to do is to be genuinely good. Mouthwashing's most profound horror lies in its portrayal of psychological breakdown. The game's fractured timeline isn't just a storytelling device, it mirrors the way trauma fragments memory and perception, creating a narrative that becomes increasingly unstable as the characters' minds begin to crack. We see this most clearly in how time itself becomes unreliable, with the story jumping between days before the crash, months after, and hours until Judgement, each shift making reality feel more tenuous. The game achieves this psychological horror through its dual perspective of Curly and Jimmy, each becoming increasingly unreliable in their own way. Curly's pre-crash sequences show a man deliberately blind to recounting danger, whilst Jimmy's post-crash narrative becomes increasingly delusional as he tries to maintain his self-image as hero rather than monster. The way these characters clash and contradict each other creates a sense of reality coming undone. When we revisit scenes from different viewpoints, details shift and change, leaving us uncertain which version, if any, represent the truth. Isolation plays a crucial role in this breakdown. Cut off from the outside world, each character's worst tendencies become amplified. Jimmy's predatory nature, previously held in check by social constraints, emerges fully. The cramped spaces of the ship force constant proximity while preventing real connections, creating a pressure cooker of paranoia and tension. The deterioration of each character follows its own tragic path. Jimmy's descent is marked by increasingly elaborate justifications for his actions, his reality warping to maintain his self-image. These episodes of lost time, hallucinations, and increasingly bizarre experiences make us question what's real and what's delusion. Is he really feeding Curly his own leg? Did the birthday party with corpses actually happen? The game refuses to provide clear answers, leaving us as unmoored as Jimmy himself. The game uses sound and vision to enhance this sense of psychological deterioration. The ambient noises of the ship begin to induce impossible sounds. Babies cry, organic squelches, breathing walls. Visual distortions increase as Jimmy's mental state worsens, with reality literally breaking apart during his episodes of extreme stress. The ship itself seems to reflect this deterioration, with space becoming increasingly impossible and organic. Memory becomes increasingly unreliable as the story progresses. Events are revisited from different perspectives, each telling slightly different from the last. The birthday scene recurs throughout the narrative, each retelling more distorted than the last, until we're no longer sure which version is real, if any of them are. The uncertainty extends beyond individual scenes to infect our understanding of the entire narrative. The events that Daisuke dies in become a perfect metaphor for the psychological horror. As Jimmy navigates them later, they transform into organic, breathing spaces filled with eyes and impossible geometries. This physical impossibility reflects his deteriorating grip on reality, as guilt and delusion merge into waking nightmare. The foam that fills the ship's corridors similarly transforms from protection to threat, mirroring how the characters' own minds turn against. Particularly effective is how the game uses Jimmy's attempts to fix situations as markers of his deepening psychosis. Each attempt to take control, to take care of it, leads to worse horror, yet he maintains his delusion of heroic action even as everything falls apart. His final act of putting Curly in the cryopod becomes the culmination of this pattern, a rescue that's really just preserving a witness to his madness. The game's fragmented structure forces players to piece together truth from unreliable accounts, much like trying to reconstruct events after trauma. This creates a mounting sense of dread as we realize we can't trust any single perspective. Each character's view is warped by their own psychological breaks and blind spots. What makes this psychological horror so effective is how it grows from recognizable human traits. Jimmy's need to see himself as good, Curly's avoidance of conflict, Anya's isolation in awareness. The horror doesn't come from external threats, but from the way isolation and pressure can transform normal human weaknesses into monstrous acts. The true horror lies in watching minds break, reality fragment, and people become unrecognizable to themselves and others. At its core, Mouthwashing is a story about the impossibility of escaping responsibility, both physical and moral. The game explores this theme through its confined setting and the ways characters attempt and fail to evade the consequences of their actions. The ship itself becomes both literal and metaphorical prison. The crash that strands them is Jimmy's first attempt to escape accountability for his assault of Anya, but it only traps him more thoroughly with the consequences of his actions. The emergency foam that fills the corridors after the crash serves as a physical manifestation of how attempts to escape often only create new forms of confinement. Jimmy's character arc centers entirely around his desperate attempt to avoid responsibility while claiming to take responsibility. Each time he tries to fix a situation, he only creates more horror he then must try to escape. His assault of Anya leads to the crash, which leads to Daisuke's death, which leads to Swansea's murder. A cascade of escalating violence born from his inability to face what he's done. His final act of putting Curly in the cryopod and then killing himself becomes his ultimate evasion, an attempt to write himself as a tragic hero rather than face his true nature. Curly's failure of responsibility takes a different form. His refusal to confront Jimmy's behavior, his attempt to fix situations through conversation rather than action, represents a more passive evasion of duty. His physical state after the crash, burnt and mobile, forced to witness but unable to act, becomes the perfect metaphor for his earlier moral paralysis. He can't escape because he already failed to act when he had his chance. The phrase "take responsibility" that appears throughout Jimmy's hallucination serves as both accusations and imperative. It haunts him precisely because he's constantly trying to escape it, twisting the meaning of responsibility into its opposite. When he says he's taking care of it, he's really trying to make it disappear, whether it is Anya's pregnancy, Daisuke's suffering, or Swansea's accusations. Anya's suicide represents perhaps the only true acceptance of an impossible situation. Unlike Jimmy's attempts to escape or Curly's passive enabling, she faces reality clearly and makes a choice. Not to escape responsibility, but to escape further victimization. Her death denies Jimmy the chance to fix anything else, forcing him to face consequences he can't control. Swansea's final confrontation with Jimmy becomes the moment where all pretense of escape falls away. His speech about his past, about being ready to face the music, stands in stark contrast to Jimmy's continued evasions. When he tells Jimmy, "I can see myself for what I am, but you? A cowardly, selfish motherfucker, and you can't even see it." He's naming the central truth Jimmy has been running from. Even the physical layout of the ship reinforces this theme of inescapable responsibility. The crew is trapped not just by space, but by their relationships to each other. Their duties, their choice, every attempt to find a way out, through the vents, through the foam, through death itself, only leads deeper into the consequences of their actions. The game's ending emphasizes the impossibility of escape through Curly's preservation in the cryopod. He becomes the inescapable witness, frozen with the truth of what happened, unable to look away or forget. Jimmy's suicide doesn't free him from responsibility. It only ensures that Curly will carry the burden of witness forward. In the end, Mouthwashing suggests that true escape is impossible not because of physical constraints, but because we carry our actions with us. Each character's attempt to evade responsibility only entangles them more deeply in its consequences. The real horror isn't that they're trapped in space, but that they're trapped with themselves and what they've done, or failed to do. In the endless chemical twilight of Curly's oxycodone dreams, Wrong Organ's final DLC for How Fish is Made offers more than just a bridge between games. It provides a descent into the fractured psyche of a man drowning in guilt. Through 3 encounters with the burnt captain, we witness the psychological unraveling that preceded Mouthwashing's physical horror. Our first meeting with Curly peels back layers of institutional capture and moral compromise. It's easy to get on this boat when you have to, you say to yourself. This is just temporary, just until I get what I need. Got bigger things planned. Then suddenly you're 1 year in, 5 years, 10. The nautical metaphor works on multiple levels. There's the literal tulpa, Pony Express as institution, and most damningly, complicity itself as a vessel that's easy to get on, hard to leave. His observation about noise becomes particularly haunting. First, I couldn't stand the constant noise, but now I can't sleep without it. This isn't just about engine sound. It's the white noise of moral compromise, the static hum of ignored warnings that becomes comfort. When he notes that a lot of things can't follow you out here, there's bitter irony. Guilt follows just fine. His warning that the outside world moves on without you becomes prophecy twice over. First as institutional isolation, then as his literal fate in cryogenic suspension. The specific rhythm of his language matters here. The way he moves from temporary to counting years mirrors how compromise creeps. First it's ignoring a comment from Jimmy, then it's dismissing Anya's concern, then suddenly you've enabled horror through 1,000 small moments of inaction. When he says, "won't even notice until it's too late," he's describing both institutional capture and moral decay. By the time you realize you're trapped, you've already helped build your own cage. His second appearance brings the darkest joke in either game. 3 men are in the hospital. The first man cries, "I lost both my hands, they told me I'll never work again." The second man wails, "I lost both my legs, they told me I'll never work again." The third man? He rejoices, "I lost my hearing, they'll never be able to tell me I'm fired again." This isn't just gallows humor, it's a perfect metaphor for how disability becomes twisted into moral escape. Each disability maps to a form of moral paralysis. Hands that can't act, legs that can't move to help, ears that can't hear cries for aid. That Curly presents this as humor shows how deeply he's internalized the idea of incapacity as absolution. The third man's joy at never having to hear bad news becomes particularly pointed. Curly will soon be unable to speak, but that muteness will free him from having to answer for his choices. His "good one, huh?" carries all the desperate energy of someone trying to laugh away approaching doom. The final monologue strips away every layer of self-deception. Next comes spite. First it'll stare back at you in the mirror, then it's those around you. They're wearing your face and you theirs. This progression from self-loathing to projected loathing explains his entire relationship with Jimmy. When he confesses, he joined because of me. It's not just about recruitment, it's about creating a mirror of his own moral compromises. The way he recalls his own words is telling. What were the words I used? Ah, right. It's a great opportunity. Easy money, just a trip or two. Someone else's words in my mouth. Notice how he distances himself. These aren't his words, but words that used him, passed through him like infection, his attempt at self-defense. Hey, worked on me as well, right? shows how we justify spreading harm by citing our own victimization. The mounting desperation in his voice becomes palpable. Change hurts, but worse things fester for a long time. I told him as much. I tried. I really did. He's not just talking about Jimmy anymore. He's talking about his own failed attempts at change, his own festering guilt. When he insists, we're defined by our past, but not slaves to it. He's trying to convince himself more than anyone. His final words become a mantra of postponed responsibility. We said tomorrow will be different. Today would be the last day, the last one, and then another, and another, and another, and another. The repetition mirrors both addiction patterns and moral compromises. Each another represents a chance to change courses that wasn't taken, a tomorrow that becomes just another today. The DLC's mechanics reinforce these themes with brutal efficiency. As a fish consuming other fish, we enact Curly's understanding of how guilt consumes identity. Each absorption makes us larger but less maneuverable, just as each moral compromise makes us more trapped. The umbilical corded fish hanging from a hook becomes a perfect symbol for Anya and her unborn child, victim suspended by institutional failure and personal cowardice. When Curly's giant eye appears to witness our consumption of the baby fish, it's a moment of forced self-witnessing. He cannot look away from what his inaction caused. The DLC's ending, transitioning directly into Jimmy first force-feeding Curly his medication, completes the cycle perfectly. These aren't just fever dreams, they're the first moments of chemical submission, when Curly's mind creates this elaborate metaphorscape of guilt and consumption, while his body learns to accept force-feeding. Each subsequent dose will push him deeper into these waters, where fish eat fish, where babies cry in the void, and where every attempt to wake up just leads to another day of witnessed horror. In these drowning dreams, we see Curly's true tragedy. A man who understands too late how his own compromises enabled catastrophe. The constant noise he learned to sleep through was conscience. The temporary position became permanent moral status. And his burns, rather than punishment, become a final escape from having to act. He floats in oxycodone dreams not because of physical pain, but because reality has become unbearable. And like the third man in his joke, he might secretly welcome the inability to respond when called to account. In the void between stars, the Tulpa drifts like a monument to selective memory. Inside, a cryopod holds what remains of Captain Curly. Not saved, but preserved, his burned flesh a testament to everything they couldn't escape. The pod's timer counts down 20 years, but this isn't hope, it's just one final cruelty. The extent of Curly's injuries, the trauma to his system, the makeshift nature of his care. They all suggest that this isn't survival, merely prolonged dying. Jimmy's final gift becomes not salvation, but extended torment, forcing Curly to carry the weight of witness even in frozen sleep. Around the pod, the ship has become a cathedral of consequence. Anya lies still in medical, having chosen a quick death over slow torture. Daisuke rests where care became killing, his trust in others having led him to his end. Swansea, who saw through every lie, stands forever silent. And Jimmy, who spent so long trying to fix everything, finally chose the cleanest break. A bullet's absolution over the messier work of living with what he'd done. But the horror of mouthwashing isn't in its body count. It's in how familiar every step towards catastrophe feels. We recognize Curly's well-meaning hesitation, his belief that every problem can be solved through conversation rather than confrontation. We understand Jimmy's desperate need to see himself as the hero, even as his actions grow more monstrous. We've seen institutions fail victims like Anya, watched good intentions pave roads to hell like the one Daisuke walked, witnessed bitter truth tellers like Swansea go unheeded until it's too late. In the ship's cargo hold, endless crates of mouthwash stand in mute testimony to the futility of cosmetic solutions, just as their product masks decay rather than solving the root issue. Jimmy's selective remorse over Curly becomes his final attempt to wash away deeper sins. He saves the one person whose suffering he can frame as tragic necessity, while leaving his true victims to the void. Even this salvation is false. The cryopod becomes not rescue but reliquary, preserving evidence of failure rather than hope for survival. If by some miracle Curly does wake in 20 years, he'll carry more than scars. He'll bear the weight of every choice that led him there. His own failures, Jimmy's crimes, Anya's desperate escape, Daisuke's betrayed trust, Swansea's bitter wisdom. But perhaps it's more merciful if he doesn't wake at all. Perhaps true kindness would have been letting him go with the others, rather than preserving him as the sole witness to horrors that no amount of mouthwash could ever clean away. In the end, the tulpa continues its endless drift, carrying its cargo of corporate banality and human consequence. Inside, a cryopod counts down years that its occupant will likely never see, while around it the evidence of everything that brought them here cools in the artificial night. This becomes the game's final devastating truth. Some stains can't be removed, some responsibilities can't be escaped, and some wounds are fatal even when we pretend we're saving their victims. No amount of time frozen in space can change that. No amount of mouthwash can mask the taste of what we've done. Oh, fucking hell. Okay, well, it's like 4 in the morning right now, so my neighbors love me. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. It helps immensely. You can subscribe to the Patreon or join the channel if you want to have access to early videos and help decide what the next videos, the topics will be on them. You don't have to, obviously, but it's just a little incentive and it helps support me. I'm very sorry this video took longer than all my other videos. I don't want to get too personal on this channel, but I've got a condition called hypothyroidism, and I've got a lot better, and that's why I can make the videos as fast as I made them before. But then they changed my meds because I was taking too much or something, and now I just feel like dog shit. So hopefully I'll get more meds and I'll feel better, but for now I do hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to let me know down below what you want to see in the future. When this video comes out, I may be streaming, so if I am, make sure to come say hi. You don't have to, of course, but it would be cool. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye bye.